The diner buzzed with the hum of casual conversation, forks clinking against plates, and the occasional hiss of the coffee machine. It was the kind of place where locals came for comfort food and travelers stopped for a slice of pie. Sam Harper sat at a corner booth, nursing a cup of black coffee. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning out of habit, a reflex honed by years in the Marines. She was trying to enjoy the simple moment, but the peace didn't last long. The sound of raucous laughter broke through the hum of the diner. Two bikers, clad in leather jackets with a wolf insignia stitched on the back, swaggered through the door. They were trouble. Sam could tell by the way the room shifted, the way the waitress stiffened when she walked over to take their order. "Hey there, sweetheart," one of them, a burly man with a thick beard and a voice like gravel, leered at the waitress. His name Patch Red Ray. "What's the special? Besides you?" The waitress, a young woman barely in her 20s, forced a smile. "Just the meatloaf today." "Meatloaf, huh? How about you put yourself on the menu instead?" The second biker, Billy, added, leaning too close. Sam clenched her jaw. She'd seen this act before. Entitled men preying on someone who couldn't fight back. She wanted to stay out of it. After all, it wasn't her fight. But when the waitress flinched as Ray grabbed her wrist, Sam's resolve cracked. "Let her go." The voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Ray and Billy turned to see Sam, calm but unflinching, staring at them. "And who the hell are you?" Ray barked, letting go of the waitress. "Just someone who doesn't like bullies," Sam said, taking a sip of her coffee before setting the cup down. Billy laughed, a high-pitched, unpleasant sound. "Oh, we got ourselves a tough chick. What are you gonna do, sweetheart? Call the cops?" "No need," Sam replied, standing slowly. She wasn't tall, but there was something about her stance, controlled, deliberate, that made the air in the diner feel heavier. "I'm giving you one chance to leave her alone and walk out of here." Ray's face twisted into an ugly grin. "Or what?" The diner fell silent. Even the cook in the kitchen stopped clanging pots and pans. Sam tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "You don't want to find out." Ray took a step closer, towering over her. "Lady, you're gonna regret?" Before he could finish, Sam moved. Fast. Her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist in a steel grip, twisting it just enough to make him yelp. A split second later, she swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. Billy lunged, but Sam was ready. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum to slam him against the counter. The whole thing lasted less than 10 seconds. Ray groaned from the floor, clutching his wrist. "You're gonna pay for this." Sam knelt down, her voice low but icy. "I warned you. Next time, I won't go easy." The bikers scrambled to their feet, their bravado replaced with something closer to fear. "You'll regret this," Ray hissed as they stumbled out the door. Sam sat back down and picked up her coffee, her hands steady. The diner erupted into hushed murmurs. The waitress approached her cautiously. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. Sam nodded, offering a small smile. "Don't let guys like that push you around." But as the bikers roared away on their motorcycles, Sam's gut told her this wasn't over. She'd seen the look in Ray's eyes, the kind that promised payback, and she wasn't wrong. Later that night, Sam Harper sat alone in her small cabin nestled deep in the Montana woods. The air outside was crisp and quiet, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the hoot of an owl. Inside, the only sound was the crackle of the fireplace. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the flames as memories clawed their way to the surface. The faces of Ray and Billy at the diner weren't what haunted her. It was the face of Mia, her squad mate and best friend. The sun blazed overhead as Sergeant Samantha Harper and her team trudged through the dry, barren landscape of Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The mission was supposed to be a simple supply escort, but in war zones, nothing was ever simple. "Hey, Harper," Mia called out, grinning despite the oppressive heat. "What's the first thing you're gonna do when we get back home?" Sam smirked. "Coffee. Real coffee. None of that powdered crap they call coffee here." Mia laughed. "You dream small, Sarge. Me? I'm hitting the beach. Just me, a book, and no one barking orders." "Sounds nice," Sam said, her smile fading as her eyes scanned the horizon. Something felt off. A crackle over the radio broke the moment. Movement up ahead. Stay sharp. The ambush came fast. Gunfire erupted from the ridges, pinning them down. Sam barked orders, her voice steady even as chaos unfolded around her. Mia was next to her, returning fire with the precision of someone who had done this 100 times before. Then came the explosion. Sam remembered the sound, deafening and gut-wrenching. She remembered the heat, the blinding dust, and the sharp sting of shrapnel cutting into her side. But most of all, she remembered Mia's scream. By the time Sam regained her senses, the fight was over and Mia was gone. Sam had dragged her lifeless body back to the convoy, refusing to leave her behind. The memory hit her like a punch to the gut. Sam closed her eyes, gripping the armrests of her chair as if to anchor herself. The weight of guilt pressed down on her chest. She had survived, but Mia hadn't. And no matter how many years passed, that fact still felt like a betrayal. After the mission, Sam had been honorably discharged. Her injuries weren't severe, but her mind was another story. She couldn't shake the feeling that she should have done more, been faster, been smarter. She tried to return to a normal life, but normal wasn't in the cards. So, she'd ended up here, in this remote cabin, far away from the noise of the world. Tonight, though, the past felt closer than ever. Sam stood and walked to the small wooden box on the mantel. Inside was a collection of keepsakes from her time in the Marines, a dog tag, a folded photo of her squad, and a medal she never wanted to talk about. Beneath it all was a worn leather bracelet, a gift from Mia. "Don't forget me," Mia had said, tying it around Sam's wrist the night before the mission. "Promise me you'll make it home." Sam clenched the bracelet in her fist, her jaw tightening. "I'm sorry, Mia," she whispered. "I'm trying." Her thoughts were interrupted by the low rumble of motorcycles in the distance. Her heart sank. The sound grew louder, closer. She moved to the window and peered outside, her breath fogging the glass. 2 sets of headlights illuminated the dirt road leading to her cabin. Sam's stomach tightened. It was them. Sam moved quickly, grabbing the pistol she kept in the drawer by the door. She checked the magazine, ensuring it was loaded, then turned off the lights. The cabin fell into darkness, except for the faint glow of the fire. She crouched by the window, watching as the 2 bikers pulled up and killed their engines. Ray and Billy dismounted, their silhouettes barely visible in the moonlight. "You sure this is the place?" Billy muttered. Ray spat on the ground. "Yeah, little Miss Tough Girl's about to learn what happens when you mess with the Iron Claws." Sam's pulse quickened. She didn't want this fight, but they brought it to her doorstep. And if there was one thing she'd learned in the Marines, it was how to defend her ground. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. They had no idea what they were walking into. The crunch of boots on gravel echoed outside the cabin. Sam crouched low by the window, her pistol in hand, her breathing slow and controlled. She wasn't scared. She'd faced worse. But she knew better than to underestimate anyone, even these 2 loudmouths. Through the dim light of the moon, she could see Ray and Billy pacing near her porch. They weren't here to apologize. "Sam Harper," Ray called out, his voice dripping with menace. "You think you can humiliate us and just walk away? That was a big mistake." Billy chuckled, the sound low and menacing. "Come on out, sweetheart. Let's have a chat." Sam didn't move. She let them talk, watching and waiting. Patience was a weapon she'd learned to wield well. Ray stepped onto the wooden porch, the creak of the boards echoing in the quiet night. "What's the matter? Not so tough now, huh?" Inside, Sam calculated her options. She didn't want to shoot them, not yet, anyway. But she wasn't about to let them barge into her home and take control. She needed to end this quickly, without drawing too much attention. Then, she heard it, the faint click of metal. Ray was carrying a crowbar, and he tapped it against the porch railing with an ominous rhythm. "All right," Sam muttered to herself, gripping her pistol tighter. "Your move." Ray nodded to Billy, who moved toward the side of the cabin, clearly intending to flank her. Sam shifted to the back window, keeping an eye on his shadowy figure. She saw him pull a switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open with a metallic snap. Billy whispered to himself, "This is gonna be fun." Before he could take another step, a sharp crack broke the silence. Sam had struck the porch light with a precise shot, plunging the entire area into darkness. "What the?" Ray exclaimed. Spinning around, Billy froze, his knife held awkwardly in the air. "What just happened?" "You wanted to chat." Sam's voice rang out from the shadows, calm and cold. "Let's chat." The biker's bravado wavered, but Ray recovered quickly. "You think you're clever, hiding in the dark? You're just delaying the inevitable." Sam stepped out from the side of the cabin, her pistol aimed at Ray. "Walk away, and you won't get hurt." Ray laughed, but it was forced. "Or what? You gonna shoot me?" "Only if you make me." Billy took a step forward, his knife glinting faintly in the moonlight. "She's bluffing." In one fluid motion, Sam raised her pistol and fired a warning shot into the dirt near Billy's feet. He yelped, stumbling back. "That was your only warning," Sam said, her voice steady. Ray's temper flared. "You think you're tough because you've got a gun? Let's see how tough you are without it." He lunged toward her. Sam sidestepped with precision, delivering a swift kick to his knee. Ray buckled, the crowbar falling from his grip. She followed up with an elbow to his jaw, sending him sprawling onto the porch. Billy hesitated for a moment before rushing at her, his knife raised. Sam caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting it sharply. The knife clattered to the ground, and she shoved him backward into the cabin wall. "Stay down," she warned, her voice like steel. But Ray wasn't done. With a roar of rage, he scrambled to his feet and grabbed the crowbar again, swinging it wildly. Sam ducked under the first swing, then blocked the second with her forearm, wincing as the metal grazed her jacket. She retaliated with a punch to his ribs, followed by a knee to his stomach. Ray dropped the crowbar once more, collapsing to his knees. Billy, still dazed, finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. "Ray, let's get out of here." Ray coughed, glaring up at Sam with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he spat. "Yeah, it is," Sam said, her pistol trained on him. "Next time, you won't walk away." Billy pulled Ray to his feet, and the two stumbled back to their motorcycles. The engines roared to life, and within seconds, they were gone, disappearing into the night. Sam stood in the silence, her chest heaving from the exertion. She lowered her pistol but didn't relax. This wasn't the end. Men like Ray didn't take defeat lightly. Stepping back into the cabin, she locked the door and leaned against it, her mind racing. She had tried to keep her life quiet, to avoid trouble. But trouble had found her anyway. Sam's gaze drifted to the bracelet on her wrist, the leather worn but still strong. She could almost hear Mia's voice. "You've faced worse, Harper. Keep your head up." Sam exhaled slowly. If the bikers wanted to make this a fight, she'd give them one they wouldn't forget. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across Sam's property. The events of the previous night still lingered in her mind, but the world outside seemed oblivious to her turmoil. The forest was peaceful, the air crisp and cool. Sam stood on her porch, sipping her coffee, her eyes scanning the horizon. She wasn't naive. Ray and Billy wouldn't let things rest. People like them never did. Sam walked to her truck, an old but reliable Ford that had seen better days, and climbed in. She needed supplies. Ammo, non-perishables, and maybe a quick stop at the diner to make sure the waitress, Kelly, was all right. The drive into town was uneventful, the winding roads bordered by dense woods on either side. But as Sam pulled into the small parking lot of the diner, her instincts prickled. Something felt off. Inside, the diner was quieter than usual. Kelly was behind the counter, wiping down a glass with shaky hands. Her smile flickered when she saw Sam. "Hey, Sam," she said, her voice thin. "You okay?" Sam slid onto a stool at the counter. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Kelly glanced around, her eyes darting to the two other customers in the diner. A middle-aged couple sitting near the window, too absorbed in their conversation to notice. "They came back," Kelly whispered, leaning in. Sam stiffened. "Ray and Billy?" Kelly nodded. "This morning, before we opened. They didn't say much, just hung around outside, staring at me through the windows. Like they were waiting for something." Did you call the cops? Kelly let out a bitter laugh. Sheriff's too busy worrying about deer season to deal with a couple of bikers. Told me to keep my doors locked and stay safe. Sam's jaw tightened. Typical. Did they leave? Kelly hesitated. Eventually. But they left this. She reached under the counter and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sliding it to Sam. Sam opened it. The words were scrawled in thick, angry letters. This isn't over. Stay out of our way. Below the note was a crude drawing of a wolf, matching the insignia on the bikers' jackets. Sam folded the note and slipped it into her jacket. Don't worry about them, she said, her voice firm. They're cowards. They try anything, and I'll take care of it. Kelly didn't look convinced, but she nodded. As Sam left the diner, she noticed a group of bikers parked near the gas station across the street. There were 4 of them this time, their bikes gleaming in the sun. They weren't Ray and Billy, but the wolf patches on their jackets were unmistakable. One of the bikers, a wiry man with a long scar across his cheek, caught sight of her. He nudged the guy next to him and pointed in her direction. Sam didn't flinch. She met their stares head-on, her expression unreadable. After a long moment, the scarred man smirked, made a mock salute, and turned back to his group. Sam climbed into her truck, her mind already working. The Iron Claws weren't just a couple of thugs. They were a gang, and a gang meant numbers. Back at the cabin, Sam prepared. She opened the gun safe in her bedroom, pulling out a shotgun, a hunting rifle, and several boxes of ammunition. Next came a tactical knife and a small med kit. As she worked, her mind drifted back to her military days. She had always been a planner, thinking 3 steps ahead. It was what had kept her squad alive on more than one occasion. By the time she finished, her cabin looked more like a small armory. She sat at the table, staring at the note Kelly had given her. She didn't want this fight, but running wasn't an option. Not anymore. The sound of tires crunching on gravel snapped her out of her thoughts. Sam moved to the window, her hand instinctively reaching for her pistol. A dark sedan pulled into her driveway, the engine idling for a moment before shutting off. A man in a suit stepped out, his movements calm and deliberate. Sam frowned. He wasn't one of the bikers. This was something else. The man approached the porch, stopping just short of the steps. He looked up at her, his face neutral. Ms. Harper? Sam opened the door, her pistol tucked behind her back. Who's asking? The man raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace. Name's Ethan Shaw. A friend of someone you might have upset recently. Sam's eyes narrowed. You with the Iron Claws? Ethan chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. Not exactly. I'm what you might call an intermediary. I'm here to deliver a message. Go on. Ethan reached into his jacket, moving slowly, and pulled out a second note. He held it out to her. Sam took it, keeping her eyes on him as she unfolded the paper. Walk away, or we'll make you regret it. Your cabin, your truck, your life, it's all fair game. Ethan cleared his throat. They're giving you one chance to back off. Do that, and this whole thing goes away. Sam's grip tightened on the note. And if I don't? Ethan's expression darkened. Then you'll find out exactly what kind of people you're dealing with. Sam stepped closer, her voice low and steady. You tell them this. I don't scare easy. And if they come for me again, they'd better be ready for what's coming. Ethan held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. Your choice, Miss Harper. But don't say I didn't warn you. He turned and walked back to his car, leaving Sam standing on the porch, the note still in her hand. As the sedan disappeared down the road, Sam took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. If the Iron Claws wanted a war, they just declared it. Sam Harper moved with purpose through her cabin, gathering supplies and organizing her defenses. The Iron Claws had made their intentions clear. They were coming for her. If she wanted to survive and win, she'd have to rely on every ounce of training she'd ever received. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the forest. Sam's cabin was a natural fortress, isolated and surrounded by dense woods. She planned to use every advantage the terrain offered. She spread a map of her property on the table, marking key points, blind spots, choke points, and places where she could set traps. Time to get creative, she muttered, reaching for a stack of supplies. Sam started outside, digging shallow pits along the most obvious approach paths to the cabin. She covered them with thin branches and leaves, making them look like solid ground. She didn't expect these traps to stop the bikers, but they'd slow them down and force them to make noise. Next, she rigged several tripwires, attaching them to small cans filled with nails. When triggered, they'd create an ear-splitting racket and send sharp debris flying. She moved back inside, double-checking her weapons. The shotgun was loaded with buckshot, perfect for close encounters. Her hunting rifle was zeroed in for longer distances, giving her the ability to pick off targets before they got too close. The cabin itself was fortified. Windows were reinforced with wooden planks, leaving just enough space for her to aim through. The front door was bolstered with a steel bar she'd fashioned during a previous winter storm. By the time the sun set, Sam was ready. She sat in the darkened living room, the only light coming from the dying embers of the fireplace. Her pistol rested on the table in front of her, alongside a flashlight and a radio she rarely used. The silence was oppressive. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle of leaves outside made her muscles tense. She had the distinct feeling of being watched, but the woods betrayed nothing. Then, in the distance, she heard it, the faint rumble of motorcycle engines. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't move. She listened, counting the engines, 3, maybe 4. The sound grew louder, then stopped abruptly. Sam waited, her breathing steady. Minutes passed. Nothing. Finally, a voice called out from the darkness. "Hey, lady, we know you're in there." Sam recognized it instantly. "Ray, you made a big mistake messing with us. We're giving you one last chance to come out and apologize." She didn't answer. Another voice joined in, one she didn't recognize. "If you don't, we're coming in. And trust me, you don't want that." Still, Sam remained silent. The bikers laughed, their voices echoing through the trees. "All right then, don't say we didn't warn you." Sam heard the crunch of boots on gravel as the bikers approached. Her traps had been set with precision, and it didn't take long for the first one to trigger. A loud snap echoed through the night, followed by a yelp of pain. What the hell was that? I stepped in something. The commotion gave Sam her first advantage. She slipped to the nearest window, raising her rifle. Through the scope, she spotted 2 figures standing near the tree line. She took a deep breath, steadying her aim, and fired. The rifle's report shattered the silence, and one of the bikers dropped to the ground, clutching his leg. "Sniper!" another voice shouted. Sam moved to another window, staying unpredictable. She spotted Ray barking orders, waving the others toward the cabin. "Spread out," he yelled. The bikers advanced cautiously now, their earlier bravado replaced with tension. Sam let them come, knowing the next traps would do their job. As one of them neared the porch, he tripped a wire. The resulting crash of cans and nails sent him stumbling backward, cursing loudly. "She's got traps everywhere." "No kidding," Sam muttered under her breath, moving to reposition again. The bikers regrouped behind a cluster of trees, clearly trying to figure out their next move. Sam could hear them arguing, their voices carrying in the still night air. "We should fall back," one of them said. "No way," Ray snapped. "She's just one person. We've got her outnumbered." Sam smirked. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She decided to up the ante. Grabbing an old flare gun from her supplies, she stepped out onto the porch, keeping to the shadows. She aimed high and fired. The flare streaked into the sky, illuminating the forest in an eerie red glow. The sudden burst of light exposed the bikers' positions, sending them scrambling for cover. Sam fired her shotgun next, the deafening blast scattering debris around the nearest tree. "Fall back," someone shouted. "Ray, we've got to go." "No, not until..." Sam fired again, this time deliberately missing, the shot hitting the ground near Ray's feet. "I said walk away," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The flare burned out, plunging the forest back into darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the sound of retreating footsteps and the roar of motorcycle engines filled the air. Sam stood on the porch, her shotgun still in hand, watching as the bikers disappeared into the night. She didn't let her guard down until the sound of their engines faded completely. Her traps had held. Her resolve had held. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As she turned to go back inside, she caught sight of something glinting on the ground. It was a chain, the kind worn as a necklace. Sam picked it up, her brow furrowing as she examined the wolf emblem hanging from it. The iron claws wouldn't let this humiliation stand. She clenched the chain in her fist, her jaw tightening. "Come back if you want," she muttered. "I'll be ready." The morning came quietly, as if the forest were trying to erase the violence of the previous night. Sam's property bore the scars of battle, scorched patches where the flare illuminated the ground, debris from the traps, and bloodstains marking where her rifle had found its target. Sam stood on her porch, nursing a mug of coffee. Her eyes scanned the treeline, searching for any sign of movement. She'd learned in the military that victory often led to retaliation, and the iron claws were not the type to back down. Her focus shifted to the chain she'd picked up the night before. The wolf emblem was heavy in her hand, its edges sharp and worn. She'd seen gang insignias like this before during her time overseas, where militias marked their allegiance with crude symbols. This wasn't just a fight with a couple of bikers, it was a war with an organized group. After ensuring the property was secure, Sam decided to make a trip into town. She needed more supplies, and to get a sense of whether word about the iron claws had spread. When she arrived, the small-town buzz felt different. People whispered in corners, eyes darting around nervously. At the gas station, the attendant barely looked up as he filled her tank. She made her way to the hardware store, where the owner, Ed, greeted her with a curt nod. "Morning, Sam," he said, his voice low. "Heard about some trouble out your way." "Word travels fast," she replied, grabbing a roll of barbed wire from the shelf. Ed leaned closer, his expression serious. "Those boys you tangled with? They're bad news. The Iron Claws been around here for a while, but they usually keep their trouble between themselves. Sounds like you poked the hornet's nest." "They poked me first," Sam said, her tone even. Ed shook his head. "Just be careful. They've got friends in high places." "Thanks for the warning," she said, placing a few more items on the counter. As she paid and loaded the supplies into her truck, she noticed a familiar face watching her from across the street. Ethan Shaw. He leaned casually against his sedan, his sharp suit standing out in the dusty town. When their eyes met, he raised a hand in greeting. Sam ignored him and climbed into her truck, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was there for more than idle observation. Back at the cabin, Sam prepared for what she knew would be the next step: recon. If the Iron Claws were organizing another attack, she needed to know their numbers, their resources, and their plan. She packed light, a pair of binoculars, her sidearm, and a small first aid kit. Dressed in dark, muted clothing, she set out on foot just before sunset. The forest offered her plenty of cover as she made her way toward the old mill on the edge of town. The mill had been abandoned for years, but Sam had heard whispers that it served as a meeting place for the Iron Claws. As she approached, the sound of voices and motorcycles confirmed her suspicions. From her position in the underbrush, Sam had a clear view of the mill's entrance. A dozen bikes were parked outside, their chrome gleaming in the moonlight. The bikers were gathered around a bonfire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. Among them, Sam spotted Ray and Billy, their postures tense as they argued with a taller man she didn't recognize. The tall man, dressed in a leather jacket adorned with the wolf emblem, seemed to be in charge. His voice carried authority, even from a distance. "She's one woman," the tall man said, his voice dripping with disdain. "And you're telling me she took out half our crew with a couple of traps?" Ray stammered, his bravado from the night before clearly diminished. "She's not just some random lady, Kane. She's trained. Military, maybe?" Kane's expression darkened. "I don't care if she's the damn Terminator. She humiliated us, and that's bad for business." Billy chimed in. "What do we do, boss?" Kane glanced around at the gathered bikers, his gaze hard and calculating. "We send a message. She wants to play soldier? Fine. Let's show her what happens when you mess with the claws." The crowd murmured in agreement, their voices low and menacing. Sam's stomach tightened. Whatever message they had planned, it wouldn't be subtle. Sam retreated silently, her mind racing. She needed to act fast. Kane's authority over the gang was evident, and his determination to retaliate made him a dangerous enemy. By the time she reached her cabin, the sky was starting to lighten. Exhaustion tugged at her, but she pushed it aside. There was no time for rest. She fortified her defenses further, adding the barbed wire she'd purchased earlier to strategic points around the property. She also set up additional traps, this time focusing on creating barriers that would funnel attackers into specific areas where she'd have the upper hand. Her preparations complete, she sat on the porch, her rifle across her lap. "You want a war," she muttered to herself, staring into the woods. "Let's see how you handle one." As the day wore on, the tension in the air grew thicker. Sam could feel it pressing down on her, an invisible weight that made every sound seem louder, every shadow deeper. The Iron Claws wouldn't wait long. They couldn't afford to. She checked her weapons one last time, making sure every gun was loaded, every knife sharpened. Her military training kicked in, her movements precise and efficient. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sam took her position near the window, her eyes scanning the treeline. The forest was quiet, but she knew better than to trust the silence. And then, in the distance, she heard it. The rumble of engines, faint at first but growing louder with every passing second. The Iron Claws were coming. The roar of motorcycles shattered the evening stillness, sending a flock of startled birds into the sky. Sam crouched low behind the window, her rifle steady in her hands. The headlights of the approaching bikes cast long shadows through the trees, illuminating the terrain she knew better than the back of her hand. She counted 6 bikes as they pulled up near the edge of her property, their engines growling before falling silent. The Iron Claws dismounted, their silhouettes stark against the fading twilight. Kane led the group, his tall frame and commanding presence unmistakable. Ray and Billy flanked him, their expressions grim. Behind them were 3 others, all armed and ready for a fight. Kane raised a hand, signaling the group to spread out. Sam didn't wait for them to make the first move. She squeezed the trigger of her rifle, sending a round into the ground just a few feet from Kane. The men froze, their heads snapping toward the cabin. "Turn around," Sam called out, her voice cold and steady. "This is your one and only warning." Kane laughed, the sound low and mocking. He stepped forward, ignoring the others' murmured protests. "You think you can scare us?" he shouted. "You're just one woman against all of us." Sam chambered another round, the sound sharp and deliberate. "You've already seen what one woman can do. You really want to test me again?" Kane's face hardened. "Enough talk. Take her down." The bikers moved as one, fanning out and advancing toward the cabin. Sam stayed calm, her training guiding her actions. The first trap triggered with a sharp snap, a concealed pit swallowing one of the bikers whole. His scream pierced the night, and the others hesitated. "Keep moving," Kane barked. Sam fired again, her rifle taking out another attacker's shoulder. The man crumpled to the ground, clutching his arm. Ray and Billy reached the edge of the porch, only to be met with a volley of nails from one of Sam's tripwire traps. They recoiled, cursing loudly. "Damn it, she's got the whole place rigged." Ray yelled. "You think?" Sam muttered, repositioning to a better vantage point. Kane didn't slow down. He charged forward, taking cover behind a tree as he assessed the situation. His eyes narrowed as he spotted the faint glint of barbed wire. "Over here," he shouted, motioning for the others to follow. "We'll flank her." Sam saw the movement and adjusted her strategy. She shifted her aim, targeting the area where Kane was headed. Her next shot took out a flashlight one of the bikers was carrying, plunging the group into deeper darkness. "Stay sharp," Kane growled. But the darkness was Sam's ally. She moved silently through the cabin, her steps purposeful and measured. The bikers regrouped near the side of the cabin, their frustration palpable. They'd expected an easy victory, but Sam had turned her home into a battlefield. "Boss, we need to pull back," one of them said, his voice shaky. Kane glared at him. "No, we finished this." But even he couldn't deny the toll the ambush had taken. 2 of his men were out of commission, and the others were starting to lose their nerve. Sam capitalized on their hesitation. She fired a shotgun blast through one of the cabin's narrow firing slits, the deafening sound scattering the group. "Fall back," Kane finally yelled. The remaining bikers retreated, dragging their wounded as they scrambled toward their bikes. Sam didn't pursue them. Instead, she stayed vigilant, her eyes scanning the woods for any sign of a counterattack. When the forest fell silent again, Sam allowed herself a moment to breathe. She stepped outside, her shotgun at the ready, and surveyed the scene. The bikers were gone, but they'd left behind plenty of evidence of their visit: trampled earth, bloodstains, and discarded weapons. Sam picked up a stray hunting knife, examining its blade before tossing it into the fire pit. Her traps had held, but she knew the iron claws wouldn't stop. Kane was too proud to let this go unanswered. As she stood there, the faint glow of motorcycle taillights disappeared over the horizon. "They'll be back," she murmured to herself, turning toward the cabin. Just as she stepped inside, Sam heard the crunch of gravel on her driveway. Her muscles tensed, and she raised her weapon, aiming at the approaching vehicle. A single car rolled to a stop, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The driver's side door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out: Ethan Shaw. Sam lowered her weapon, but didn't relax. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ethan raised his hands, his expression calm. "I heard about your little showdown. Thought you could use some help." Sam frowned, her distrust evident. "Why would you care?" Ethan smirked, leaning against the car. "Let's just say I have my reasons. And right now, we've got a common enemy." Sam studied him for a moment before stepping aside. "You've got 2 minutes. Make it count." Ethan nodded and walked toward the cabin, his eyes flicking to the fortified windows and scattered debris. "This is going to get a lot worse before it gets better," he said. Sam's jaw tightened. "Then we'd better be ready." Sam and Ethan sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the dim light casting shadows that danced along the cabin walls. Sam's rifle rested within arm's reach, and her expression remained guarded as Ethan took a sip from the mug she'd reluctantly offered him. "Start talking," she said, her voice flat. Ethan placed the mug down deliberately, his gaze meeting hers. "The Iron Claws aren't just a biker gang. They're part of something bigger, a network that moves drugs, weapons, and even people across state lines. Kane is just one link in the chain." "I've heard this kind of story before," Sam replied, leaning back slightly. "What's your angle?" Ethan smirked. "Straight to the point. I like that. My angle is simple. I want to bring them down. But I can't do that alone. And you've already proven you're more than capable of holding your own against them." Sam narrowed her eyes. "You're law enforcement." "Federal," Ethan confirmed. "DEA, to be exact." Sam stood abruptly, pacing to the window. She peered out into the night, ensuring the forest was still and undisturbed. "You should have started with that instead of playing mysterious in town," she said, her tone sharp. Ethan shrugged. "Didn't want to spook you before I had a clear picture of what I was dealing with. After last night, I think I've got it now." Sam turned back to face him. "So you're using me as bait." "Not bait. A partner," Ethan corrected, though his expression admitted the truth behind her accusation. Sam folded her arms. "And what do I get out of this partnership?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a serious tone. "You get them off your back. Permanently. You think they'll stop after tonight? Kane won't let this slide. But with your skills and my resources, we can take the fight to them." Ethan reached into his pocket, pulling out a small USB drive. He placed it on the table and slid it toward her. "What's this?" Sam asked, not moving to pick it up. "Everything I've got on the Iron Claws," Ethan said. "Names, locations, connections. Kane isn't the top dog. He's just one of many. But if we can dismantle his operation, the rest of the network will start to crumble." Sam stared at the drive for a long moment before finally picking it up. "And what happens to me when this is over? I'm not exactly looking to join the witness protection program." Ethan smiled. "You won't have to. I'll make sure you're left alone, and I'll personally ensure Kane and his crew don't come within 100 miles of you ever again." Sam considered his words, her mind weighing the risks. She didn't trust Ethan, at least, not yet, but his offer was tempting. "All right," she said finally. But I'm calling the shots here. I know this terrain, and I know how these guys think. Fair enough, Ethan said, standing and extending a hand. Partners. Sam hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. For now. Good. Ethan glanced around the cabin. You've done an impressive job fortifying this place, but we'll need more if we're going to go on the offensive. Sam smirked. Lucky for you. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. The next morning, Sam and Ethan got to work. They spent hours setting up additional defenses around the property, from reinforced barriers to more elaborate traps. Ethan, to his credit, didn't complain about the physical labor, though Sam caught him wincing more than once as they hauled heavy supplies. Between tasks, they strategized, using the information on Ethan's USB drive to identify potential weak points in Kane's operation. Here, Ethan said, pointing to a map spread across the kitchen table. This warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's where they store most of their weapons and supplies. If we hit it, we'll cripple their ability to regroup. Sam nodded. We'll need to move fast and quiet, and we'll need a distraction to draw them away from the warehouse. Ethan grinned. I think I can arrange that. As the day wore on, Sam found herself studying Ethan more closely. Despite his polished demeanor, there was a ruggedness to him, a hint that he'd seen his fair share of conflict. What's your story? She asked during a rare quiet moment. Ethan glanced at her, surprised by the question. You mean besides the badge and the suit? Sam nodded. Ethan hesitated before answering. I grew up in a town not much different from this one. My older brother fell in with a gang. Nothing as big as the Iron Claws, but dangerous enough. He got killed in a turf war when I was 17. I joined the DEA to make sure no one else had to go through what my family did. Sam didn't respond immediately. Instead, she handed him a bottle of water and gestured for him to sit. We've all got our battles, she said quietly. Ethan met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. As darkness fell, Sam and Ethan prepared for their next move. The warehouse raid was scheduled for the following night, but tonight was about readiness. Sam checked her weapons one last time, her movements automatic and precise. Ethan, meanwhile, monitored a small radio scanner, listening for any chatter from the Iron Claws. They're planning something, he said, his expression grim. We'll need to be ready for anything. Sam smirked, her confidence unwavering. They have no idea what they're walking into. As the forest outside grew still, the two of them settled into their positions, waiting for the inevitable. The forest was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig feel deafening. Sam crouched near the edge of her property, her night vision binoculars scanning the treeline. Ethan was a few feet away, his weapon drawn and his demeanor unusually tense. They're coming, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, gripping his pistol tighter. How many? 4, maybe 5, Sam replied, lowering the binoculars. They're trying to move quietly, but they're amateurs. Ethan smirked. You have a unique definition of amateur. Sam didn't respond. She shifted her position, signaling for Ethan to stay low. The bikers were inching closer, their silhouettes just barely visible against the faint moonlight. The first biker reached the edge of the cabin's perimeter, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. He froze when his foot caught something, a nearly invisible tripwire. The explosion was small but effective, a flashbang that blinded and deafened the group instantly. Sam moved quickly, taking down the stunned man with a well-aimed strike from her rifle butt. Ethan opened fire, his shots precise and calculated. One biker dropped, clutching his leg as he screamed in pain. The remaining attackers scrambled for cover, their shouts of panic echoing through the night. Fall back, one of them yelled, but Sam wasn't about to let them retreat so easily. She fired again, her bullet hitting the dirt just inches from another biker's head. Tell Kane this is what happens when you come for me, she shouted. The bikers didn't need any more convincing. They fled into the darkness, leaving their wounded behind. Ethan moved toward the downed man, his weapon trained on him. What do we do with him? Sam approached, her eyes cold and calculating. He's going to deliver a message. The biker groaned, barely conscious. Sam crouched beside him, her voice low and menacing. Go back to Cain. Tell him if he wants a war, he'll get one. But he won't win. The man nodded weakly, and Ethan helped him to his feet before shoving him toward the forest. Back in the cabin, Sam and Ethan reviewed their plan for the warehouse raid. The attack had only strengthened their resolve, but it also underscored the urgency of their mission. We hit the warehouse tomorrow night, Ethan said, spreading the map across the table again. They'll be on edge after tonight, but they won't expect us to go on the offensive so soon. Sam traced a route on the map with her finger. We approach from the south. The tree line will give us cover, and it's far enough from the main road that they won't hear us coming. And the distraction? Ethan asked. Sam smirked. I've got just the thing. As they prepared their gear, Ethan broke the silence. You were impressive out there tonight. Most people would have panicked. Sam shrugged, checking the scope on her rifle. Most people haven't been through what I have. Ethan hesitated, then asked, Afghanistan? Sam's hands stilled for a moment before she resumed her task. Among other places. Ethan nodded, sensing the subject was a sensitive one. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're on my side. Sam glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. Let's see if you still feel that way after tomorrow. The following evening, the pair set out for the warehouse, moving swiftly and silently through the woods. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, making the darkness almost complete. Ethan carried a duffel bag filled with explosives, Sam's idea for the distraction. She led the way, her steps deliberate and quiet, her senses attuned to every sound around them. When they reached the edge of the clearing, Sam signaled for Ethan to stop. They crouched behind a fallen log, surveying the scene. The warehouse was a large, nondescript building surrounded by chain-link fencing. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. 2 at the front, probably more inside, Ethan whispered. Sam nodded. We stick to the plan. I'll take out the guards. You plant the charges. Be quick about it. Sam moved like a shadow, her silenced pistol taking out the first guard before he even realized she was there. The second guard turned, his flashlight sweeping toward her, but she was faster. He dropped to the ground with a muffled thud. Ethan slipped through the gate, heading straight for the building. He placed the charges at strategic points, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Sam covered him from a distance, her eyes scanning for any signs of movement. Hurry up, she muttered under her breath. Just as Ethan finished planting the last charge, the sound of footsteps echoed from inside the warehouse. A door creaked open, and a figure stepped out. It was Cain. Sam's breath caught, her grip tightening on her weapon. Ethan froze, his hand hovering over the detonator. Cain's eyes scanned the area, his expression suspicious. I know you're out here, he called. Come out and face me, you coward. Sam's mind raced. If Cain spotted Ethan, their entire mission would be compromised. She made a decision. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the shadows, her weapon trained on Cain. You want me? Here I am. Cain's eyes narrowed as he saw Sam step out of the shadows, her rifle steady in her hands. He raised an eyebrow, his smirk betraying a mix of amusement and disdain. Figured you'd be the one to show up, Cain said, his voice low and menacing. But I didn't expect you to bring company. Sam glanced over her shoulder, her gaze meeting Ethan's. He was crouched behind the warehouse, hands on the detonator, waiting for the right moment. Cain followed her gaze and chuckled. You really think you're going to walk away from this? Sam's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. I don't plan on walking away. I plan on making sure you don't, Cain. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was thick with unspoken threats, the only sound the distant rustling of the trees. Cain's hand drifted toward the gun at his side. You don't know who you're messing with, Cain growled, his smirk fading into a snarl. This is bigger than you. Bigger than anything you could ever handle. Sam's grip tightened on her rifle, her finger hovering near the trigger. I've handled worse than you, she shot back, her voice steady. And I don't scare easily. She wasn't lying. Sam had been in worse situations than this, and she'd come out the other side alive. This was just another fight, and she wasn't about to let Cain walk away unscathed. Suddenly, Cain's smirk returned, and he raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine. You want to fight? You got one. But before Sam could react, he spun on his heel, sprinting toward the open warehouse door. Ethan now? Sam shouted. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He slammed his thumb down on the detonator, and the world erupted in a burst of light and sound. The explosion rattled the ground beneath them, the shockwave forcing Sam to take a step back as debris flew into the air. Kane, however, had already ducked into the warehouse, narrowly avoiding the blast. Sam cursed under her breath, sprinting toward the entrance as she heard the sound of footsteps echoing from inside. Kane was fast, but she was faster. Ethan was right behind her, his gun drawn and ready. Together, they charged into the darkened interior of the warehouse, their eyes adjusting to the low light. Inside, the smell of burning debris lingered, and the sound of creaking metal echoed through the space. The warehouse was a labyrinth of stacked crates and industrial machinery, providing plenty of cover for anyone hiding. Sam's instincts kicked in as she darted around a corner, her senses on high alert. "Kane," she called out, her voice a challenge. "Come out and face me, you coward." A laugh echoed back from the shadows. "You really think I'm going to make it that easy for you?" Sam smirked. "No, but I don't need it to be easy." Without warning, a shot rang out from the dark. Sam ducked just in time, the bullet whizzing past her ear. Ethan fired back, but their target was elusive, always staying just out of sight. "They're hiding somewhere," Ethan muttered, glancing around. "We need to move. This place is a maze." "Agreed," Sam said, her eyes scanning for any movement. She motioned for Ethan to follow her as she darted deeper into the warehouse, each step careful and deliberate. The building was a rat's nest of steel beams and crates, and every time Sam thought she had Kane cornered, he'd slip away into the shadows. It was a game of cat and mouse, and Kane was winning. The seconds dragged on, and Sam could feel her patience wearing thin. They had to end this, and they had to end it now. Then, from behind a stack of crates, she saw it. Movement. A flash of leather. Kane was watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Without hesitation, Sam lunged, her rifle raised and her eyes locked on her target. But as she rounded the corner, she ran straight into a wall of muscle. Kane grabbed her by the shoulders, slamming her into the ground with a grunt. Sam fought back, her legs kicking as she tried to break free. But Kane's grip was unyielding, and she could feel the pressure building on her chest. "Not so tough now, are you?" Kane sneered, his face inches from hers. Sam gritted her teeth, summoning every ounce of strength she had. With a quick twist, she broke his hold and shoved him off. Before Kane could react, she was on her feet again, her rifle aimed at his chest. Kane's eyes flickered between the rifle and Sam's unyielding expression. He raised his hands, a sneer still on his face. "You think you've won? You think killing me will stop this?" "I don't need to kill you to stop this," Sam said coldly, "but it sure as hell will make things easier." Just as she was about to pull the trigger, she heard a shout from behind her. "Sam, no." It was Ethan, his voice filled with urgency. Sam hesitated, her fingers still on the trigger. Kane was dangerous, but Ethan's words rang in her ears. What if this wasn't the right moment? What if there was another way? Kane saw her doubt and made a move, lunging toward her. In that split second, everything happened in a blur. Sam fired, her shot true, but Kane was already moving, his body jerking with the impact. He fell to the ground with a thud, blood pooling around him. But Sam didn't wait around to see if he was dead. She turned and ran toward Ethan, who was already pulling her toward the exit. "Get out of here now," Ethan shouted, his voice panicked. As they bolted toward the door, another explosion rang out, this one larger than the first. The roof above them cracked, and debris began to fall. Sam and Ethan didn't look back. They sprinted into the night, the sound of the warehouse collapsing behind them as the ground shook beneath their feet. The night air hit Sam like a cold slap as she and Ethan raced through the thick underbrush, the distant rumble of the warehouse collapsing behind them. The trees seemed to blur together as they ran, their breaths heavy and erratic. Sam's heart was pounding in her chest, but it wasn't just from the physical exertion. The adrenaline from the explosion, the fight with Kane, and the near miss had her mind racing. They reached the edge of the forest, and Sam glanced back toward the ruins of the warehouse. The orange glow of the fire was barely visible through the trees, but the crackling of the flames was a harsh reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. "We need to keep moving," Ethan urged, his voice low. "We can't stay out here for long." Sam nodded, her mind still spinning. Right. They moved quickly, darting through the trees and avoiding the main road. Sam was hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. Even though the bikers were likely still reeling from the explosion, she wasn't about to take any chances. They reached a small clearing, and Sam stopped for a moment, trying to catch her breath. Ethan mirrored her, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "We can't keep running forever," Sam said, wiping the sweat from her brow. "We need a plan." Ethan gave her a sidelong glance. "You always have a plan." Sam smirked despite herself. "Not always." Ethan sat down on a log, resting his rifle across his lap. "What now?" Sam crossed her arms, considering their options. The bikers would eventually figure out what had happened, and when they did, they'd come looking for them. And Kane, she couldn't let him get away. "We hit them where it hurts," Sam said, her voice steady. "We go after their supply lines. If we can take out their resources, their power, their people," she trailed off, her gaze hardening, "they'll fall apart. We hit them in waves, fast, hard, relentless." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And what about Kane?" "We'll deal with him later," Sam replied. "He's not going anywhere, but if we let him regroup, he'll come back stronger. We need to make sure he's too weak to retaliate." Ethan grinned. "Now that sounds like something I can get behind." Sam stood up, brushing the dirt off her pants. "We'll need intel. A few of Kane's men might have made it out of the warehouse. We'll track them down, find out where they're regrouping, and make our next move from there." Ethan nodded. "I'll get us some transport. A quick ride and we'll be back on the offensive in no time." They made their way through the forest, moving with purpose but staying low. Sam's mind was already racing ahead, formulating a new plan, a new strategy. She had to stay 2 steps ahead of Kane. The longer she waited, the stronger he would grow, and the stakes were only getting higher. But she knew one thing. Kane had made the mistake of underestimating her, and now she was going to make him regret it. Just as they were nearing the edge of the forest, Sam caught a glimpse of movement. She signaled for Ethan to stop and crouch behind a cluster of trees. They waited, every sense heightened. A group of bikers appeared in the clearing ahead. They were talking in low voices, unaware of Sam and Ethan's presence. Sam counted 6 of them, too many for her to take on alone. Ethan's fingers twitched toward his gun, but Sam stopped him with a gesture. "No need to draw attention just yet. Let's see what they're up to." They remained silent, listening to the conversation. "After the explosion, we need to find Kane," one of the bikers said. "We can't let him go down like that." Another one grunted. "You know where he's at?" The first biker shrugged. "He's not answering the radio. We'll head to the hideout in the mountains. It's the safest place right now." Sam exchanged a look with Ethan. The mountains. It was the last place she wanted to go, but it could be their best lead on Kane's location. They waited for the bikers to move out of the clearing before slipping quietly behind them. Sam and Ethan kept their distance, moving swiftly and silently through the dense underbrush. The bikers didn't seem to notice that they were being followed. They were too focused on getting to their hideout in the mountains, no doubt hoping to regroup and strategize. Sam's mind was sharp. She kept thinking of the worst-case scenario. The bikers reaching the hideout before them, Kane already regrouping with reinforcements, and her entire plan falling apart. But Sam wasn't about to let that happen. She had fought too hard to let Kane slip through her fingers again. As the night wore on, the terrain began to shift. The trees grew sparser, the ground rockier. The bikers ahead of them slowed as they entered the foothills of the mountain range. Sam and Ethan took a cautious approach, making sure to stay well out of sight. They crept along a narrow trail, keeping low and moving with the precision of soldiers. The hideout was close. Sam could feel it. The air was thick with tension, and every instinct she had told her that they were walking into a trap. But there was no turning back now. At the top of a ridge, Sam stopped and signaled for Ethan to crouch low. Below them, They could see the hideout, a small, fortified cabin nestled against the mountain's edge. "Too quiet," Sam muttered. "Something's off." Ethan looked at her, his expression tense. "You think they're ready for us?" "Maybe," Sam said, her eyes scanning the area. "But I'm not going to take any chances." She motioned for Ethan to follow her, and together, they began to circle the hideout from the back. There was no sign of the bikers inside, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far worse than they expected. The cabin loomed ahead, its wooden walls old and weathered, but fortified with reinforced metal. Sam's eyes scanned the perimeter as she and Ethan crept along the rocky path behind it. The air was cool, the distant howl of wolves the only sound besides the crunch of gravel beneath their boots. "It's too quiet," Ethan murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've got to be waiting for us." "I think they're more than just waiting," Sam replied, her mind working quickly. "They're expecting us. Kane wouldn't let us get this close without setting something up." Ethan nodded, his hand resting on his rifle. "So, what's the plan?" Sam glanced at the cabin again, noting the lack of movement inside. She could almost feel the tension in the air, a prickling sense of danger that told her they were about to step into a trap. "We going fast and hard," Sam said. "We need to take them by surprise, hit them before they know what's happening. I'll cover the front. You take the back." Ethan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. He trusted Sam, and they had been through enough together that he knew not to question her instincts. They circled the cabin, moving quickly but cautiously. As they reached the back of the building, Sam signaled for Ethan to stop. She could see the faint glow of light through the cracks in the wooden walls. "There's someone in there," she whispered. "More than one," Ethan replied, his voice low and steady. Sam nodded, motioning for him to cover her. She moved to the front of the cabin, her steps as quiet as possible. She could feel the weight of the moment, the tension building in her chest. With one swift motion, Sam kicked open the door, her rifle aimed and ready. The door slammed against the wall with a deafening bang, and she charged into the room. The bikers inside hadn't expected the sudden intrusion. Sam's rifle barked once, twice, and two men dropped to the floor before they could react. She didn't stop to check their pulses. There was no time. Just as Sam was about to move deeper into the cabin, a voice rang out from the shadows. Well, if it isn't the little soldier." Kane stepped into the doorway, a wicked grin on his face. His leather jacket creaked as he adjusted his stance, his hands resting on the handles of his knives. "I knew you'd come for me, Sam," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You never know when to quit." Sam's grip tightened on her rifle, but she didn't pull the trigger. "I'm not here to talk, Kane." "Then let's skip the small talk and go straight to the part where you beg for mercy," Kane sneered, his eyes gleaming with malice. Before Sam could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind her. She spun, her rifle ready, but it was too late. A dozen bikers had flooded into the room, surrounding her and Ethan. "We've been expecting you," one of them said with a smirk. Sam's heart raced. The trap was sprung, and they had walked right into it. She could see the smug satisfaction in Kane's eyes, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of doubt. She wasn't outnumbered, but she was outgunned. Kane stepped forward, his voice cold. "This is it, Sam. The end of the line. I gave you a chance to back off, but now you've forced my hand." Sam's pulse quickened. She was cornered, but she wasn't going down without a fight. Her mind raced, her eyes darting to the exits, to the weapons, to the men surrounding her. There had to be a way out. "You've made a big mistake, Kane," Sam said, her voice calm despite the danger. "You think you have control here, but you don't." "Oh, I think I do," Kane sneered. "I've been in control from the start." Sam studied him, her eyes narrowing. She could feel the weight of his words, but she wasn't buying it. Kane was desperate. He had to be. Suddenly, Sam lunged, her rifle snapping into action. She fired twice, taking down two of the bikers nearest to her. The others scattered, but they didn't flee, they advanced. Ethan, ever the calm partner, was already moving, firing from behind cover. The room erupted into chaos as bullets flew and bodies hit the ground. Sam ducked behind a table, reloading her weapon in record time. But the bikers were relentless. They moved quickly, covering each other's positions, making it harder for Sam and Ethan to regain the upper hand. Kane, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. Sam's eyes scanned the room frantically. He was hiding, waiting for the right moment to strike. Sam could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she fired again, hitting another biker in the shoulder. She glanced at Ethan, who was keeping a steady rhythm, picking off their attackers with precision. But even as they fought back, Sam knew they were losing ground. The bikers were too many, and they were too well organized. The back door suddenly slammed open, and more bikers rushed in. Sam cursed under her breath, realizing they were being surrounded. But then, in the chaos of the moment, Sam heard something, a faint noise, a crackling sound. Without thinking, Sam dove for cover, rolling behind a stack of crates. She peeked around the corner just in time to see a small explosion rip through the wall of the cabin. The blast sent debris flying, throwing the bikers off their feet. Sam and Ethan used the moment of confusion to strike back with renewed force. The smoke cleared, and Sam saw a familiar face standing in the doorway, Ethan's old military buddy, Marcus. "You're not the only ones who can call for backup," Marcus said, his grin wide and dangerous. Sam didn't have time to respond. The tide of battle had turned, and with Marcus's help, they had a chance to finish this. With Marcus covering their flank, Sam and Ethan pushed forward. The bikers were disoriented, and with their numbers thinned, they began to fall back. Kane, realizing his plan was unraveling, made a final, desperate move. He charged towards Sam, his knives raised. But Sam was faster. She dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him and sending him crashing to the floor. Kane scrambled to his feet, his breath ragged. "This isn't over, Sam," he spat, his eyes wild. "It is now," Sam said, as she delivered the final blow. The smoke from the explosion still hung in the air, thick and acrid, making it hard to breathe. Sam stood over Kane's crumpled form, her weapon still raised, her fingers steady despite the chaos around her. The fight was over, but the war wasn't won yet. She could hear the sound of distant sirens, growing louder. Backup was on the way, but Sam didn't wait for the cavalry. She had learned long ago that relying on others could be a fatal mistake. Kane was on the ground, bloodied and groaning, but still alive. Sam didn't waste any time on him. Instead, she turned to Marcus, who had just finished securing the remaining bikers. "You all right?" she asked, her voice sharp. Marcus wiped blood from his lip and nodded. "I'm fine. You?" Sam glanced over her shoulder, checking for any remaining threats. "I've been through worse," she muttered. Ethan appeared from the shadows, wiping his rifle clean. He met Sam's eyes, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," he said. Sam's lips curved into a tight smile. "Not yet." As the bikers were rounded up and restrained, Sam took a moment to survey the scene. The cabin, once a symbol of Kane's power, was now a wreck. The walls were scorched, the windows shattered, and the air reeked of gunpowder and blood. "Where's the intel?" Sam asked, her eyes scanning the bodies. Marcus bent down, rifling through one of the biker's pockets. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Here." Sam grabbed it and unfolded it quickly. The paper was a list of names and locations, people who were still loyal to Kane, people who would be coming for them next. Ethan read over her shoulder. "This could be a problem." Sam nodded. "We've taken out the leadership, but the network is still alive. This is bigger than we thought." The reality of what they had just uncovered set in. Kane had been a pawn in a much larger game. As Sam studied the list, she saw names tied to criminal syndicates, rogue elements in the government, and military contractors who were all part of a network of corruption and violence. "This is more than just bikers and street gangs," Sam said, her voice low. "This goes deep. Too deep." Ethan's face darkened. "What do we do now?" Sam clenched her fists, her mind already shifting into strategy mode. She knew that exposing this network wouldn't be easy, it would be dangerous. "We take down every last one of them," Sam said, her voice resolute. "But we do it carefully. We can't afford to make mistakes." Marcus nodded. "I'll help you however I can." Ethan looked at Sam, his eyes unwavering. "We're in this together." The sirens grew louder, signaling the approach of local law enforcement. Sam knew they had to leave before they were caught in a legal crossfire. But even as they moved to leave the cabin, she felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. "Let's go," Sam ordered, her voice firm. "We don't have much time." They moved swiftly, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something far bigger, something that would require every ounce of strength, strategy, and sacrifice they had. They returned to the safety of a secluded location, away from prying eyes. It was there that Sam gathered her team, going over their next steps. They had a map, a plan, and a list of targets, but Sam knew they needed more than just intel. They needed allies, resources, and time. "I'll start contacting the people we trust," Marcus said. "We need more hands on deck if we're going to take down a network this big." "Agreed," Sam replied. "But be careful who you trust. Kane's influence runs deep, and we don't know who's working both sides." Ethan looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You really think they'll come after us?" "I don't just think it, I know it," Sam said. "This isn't over. They'll regroup, and they'll come back stronger. But we're ready." The next few days were a blur of preparation and surveillance. Sam kept her focus, reviewing the intel they had gathered, preparing for the next phase of the operation. As the hours passed, she couldn't help but think back to the chaos of the cabin, to the adrenaline and the close calls. But she knew this battle was only one piece of a much larger puzzle, and with every step, the stakes grew higher. It was late one night when Sam found herself alone, staring at the map that covered the table in front of her. She traced her finger over the locations on the list, the biker clubs, the corrupt officials, the hidden caches of weapons and drugs. Her mind whirred as she considered every possible angle. She had always been good at reading the enemy, at predicting their moves. But this was something different. This was a war, and it was only a matter of time before it escalated further. The door creaked open behind her, and Ethan stepped into the room, his face grim. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Sam didn't look up. "Just thinking." Ethan came up behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this." Sam finally looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "I don't know, Ethan. This time, it's different." The days were blending together in a haze of strategy sessions, covert meetings, and nonstop surveillance. Sam felt the pressure mounting. Kane's network was far more intricate than she had imagined, and each new lead they uncovered only seemed to lead to more dead ends. The truth was, no matter how many bikers they took down, the shadowy figures behind it all were still lurking in the background, their plans moving forward with chilling precision. Sam had been in tight situations before, but this felt different. Every move she made seemed to echo with consequences, every step a potential misstep. She had always relied on her instincts, her ability to fight, to win. But now, the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. The weight of it pressed down on her, but she couldn't afford to show it. Her team needed her to be strong, to be focused, and so she kept her doubts hidden behind a facade of calm determination. It was in the middle of one of their long, tense planning sessions that the door opened, and a new face stepped in. One that made Sam's heart skip a beat. "Long time no see," a voice said, filled with just the right amount of warmth and sarcasm. Sam's head snapped up, her hand instinctively reaching for the gun holstered at her side, but she stopped when she saw who it was. Standing in the doorway, dressed in civilian clothes, was none other than her old military commander, Colonel James Westbrook. Westbrook had been more than just a superior officer. He had been a mentor, a father figure, someone who had taught Sam the value of loyalty, honor, and survival. She had trusted him with her life, and now, standing in front of her, his presence sent a cold shiver down her spine. "What are you doing here?" Sam's voice was steady, but her eyes narrowed. Westbrook stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I've been keeping tabs on this operation of yours, Sam. The word is, you've got some serious firepower behind you now. I thought it was time we caught up." Ethan, who had been leaning against the wall, straightened at the mention of Westbrook's name. "You're with the military?" he asked, his tone cautious. Sam nodded, still unsure of where this was going. Westbrook was known for his high-level connections, both in the military and the shadowy corners of the world that most people never saw. But he had been out of the picture for years, ever since the military had cut ties with him after some controversial decisions. "Something doesn't feel right about this," Sam muttered under her breath. Westbrook ignored her suspicion. "You've got a situation on your hands, Sam, and I'm here to help. We need to talk." The tension in the room was palpable as Sam motioned for Westbrook to sit. She remained standing, her arms crossed, her eyes never leaving his face. "What do you want from me?" Sam asked, her voice sharp. Westbrook leaned forward, his expression serious. "I'm not here to ask for anything, Sam. I'm here to offer you something." He pulled out a small folder from his bag and placed it on the table between them. Inside was a set of classified documents, each page brimming with intel that made Sam's stomach churn. "These are the names of people tied to Kane's operation. People you wouldn't expect," Westbrook continued. "Government officials, corporate execs, military contractors, all of them working together to keep this network running." Sam felt a chill creep up her spine. "And what makes you think you can just hand this to me?" Westbrook's eyes locked onto hers, his expression unwavering. "Because I've got connections you don't, and I've got a stake in this, too. This goes higher than you think, Sam. Kane's just a small player. The real power behind this operation is untouchable, but with the right resources, we can start making moves." "You're telling me this now?" Sam's voice was tight with disbelief. "After everything that's happened, you just show up and hand me intel?" "I've been tracking this for years, Sam. You're not the only one who's been looking for answers, but it's bigger than just you and Kane. You need help, and I can give it to you." Sam stared at Westbrook for a long moment, considering his words. She knew he was right about one thing. This situation was much bigger than just the bikers. But that didn't mean she trusted him. "I've fought this fight on my own before," Sam said, her voice hard. "I don't need anyone's help, especially not yours." Westbrook didn't flinch. "You always were a stubborn one." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But this is bigger than you, Sam. You can't keep fighting this alone." For a moment, Sam's mind flashed back to the past, the missions, the camaraderie, the bond she had shared with Westbrook and the other soldiers. But she also remembered the way things had ended, the betrayal, the lies, the fallout that had ruined everything. "I trusted you once," Sam said, her voice low, filled with the weight of old wounds. "I'm not making that mistake again." Westbrook's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "I didn't ask you to. But if you want to take this network down, you're going to need more than just muscle. You're going to need leverage. You're going to need someone who can get things done in the shadows." Sam stood still, her fingers clenching into fists. "I can get it done without you." Westbrook sighed, clearly growing frustrated. "Sam, you're not listening. You can't do it all on your own." The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of Westbrook's words hung in the air. Sam's mind raced, the old conflict warring with her desire to do things her way. Ethan, who had been silently watching the exchange, stepped forward. "You said you could help us, but can we trust you?" Westbrook didn't hesitate. "You can. I'm offering you everything I know, everything I've gathered. All I ask in return is that you trust me to help you bring them down." Sam looked at Ethan, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She didn't trust Westbrook, not fully. But the intel in front of her was valuable, more than she had right now. And if there was any chance of bringing down the people behind this network, she couldn't afford to turn it down. "I'll work with you," Sam said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "But I'm calling the shots. Understood?" Westbrook's smile was faint, but it was there. Understood. As Westbrook left the room, Sam couldn't shake the unease that lingered. She was used to trusting her instincts, but this felt different. Westbrook had been a mentor, but now he was a wild card. A man with motives she couldn't fully comprehend. But the war was bigger than her trust issues. She couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment. The game had changed, and Sam had to adapt. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked, his voice soft, but concerned. Sam glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't have a choice." The moment Sam closed the door behind her, her mind was already running through the next steps. Westbrook's appearance had thrown her off balance, but she couldn't afford to dwell on that. She had to focus. The information he'd given her was too crucial to ignore, and the network behind Kane was far more dangerous than she had anticipated. She took a deep breath and looked out the window of the safe house. The sky was dark, the stars barely visible beneath the blanket of city lights, and Sam couldn't shake the feeling that every move they made now was being watched. They were no longer operating in the shadows. They were entering enemy territory, and that brought risks no one could fully calculate. "I'm not trusting him," Sam muttered to herself, though part of her knew she had no choice. Ethan approached from behind, his voice calm but curious. "You don't have to. But we need allies, Sam. This isn't a fight we can win alone." "I know," Sam said, turning to face him. "But when it comes to Westbrook, it feels like we're playing a dangerous game." Ethan met her eyes. "Dangerous games are what we're in, Sam. From here on out, there are no safe moves." The next few hours were spent refining the plan. Westbrook had given them a list of targets, people high in the food chain who were directly tied to Kane's network. Sam had done her due diligence, and the names checked out. But there was a deeper sense of foreboding in the air. Every part of her experience told her that the real battle was just beginning. The first target was a man named Simon Duran, a former military contractor turned high-ranking mercenary who had ties to some of the most dangerous players in the world. According to Westbrook, Duran had been running arms deals and laundering money for the network, using his connections to hide in plain sight. The plan was simple: infiltrate his compound, take him down, and retrieve the intel that would lead them to the next link in the chain. But Sam knew that things rarely went according to plan in their line of work. "Duran's fortress is practically impenetrable," Marcus said, his tone skeptical. "We'll need a lot more than a good plan to get in there." "We'll find a way," Sam said, her eyes narrowing. "We don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect time. The longer we wait, the more powerful this network gets. Duran's the key." Westbrook had been clear. Taking out Duran was their first step in disrupting the entire network. But Sam's gut told her there was more to this than just bringing down a criminal mastermind. The team moved out early the next morning, all of them ready for the operation, though the unease lingered in the air. As they prepared to leave, Sam found herself alone in the back of the van with Marcus. "You're really okay with working with him again?" Marcus asked quietly. "With Westbrook?" Sam glanced out the window, her thoughts momentarily drifting. "It's not about what I want. We need intel, and he's the only one with the resources to help us." "You don't trust him," Marcus pressed. "No," Sam replied sharply, "but I don't have a choice." Marcus didn't respond immediately, but Sam could tell he was processing everything. The tension was thick between them. Marcus had always been a man of integrity, and working with someone like Westbrook didn't sit well with him. "I'm just saying," Marcus finally said, his voice heavy with concern. "If things go south, we need to be ready for a fight, on more than one front." Sam nodded. "I'm counting on you." By the time they reached Duran's compound, night had fallen, cloaking their movements in darkness. The sprawling estate was surrounded by high walls, guard towers, and several armed mercenaries patrolling the perimeter. Sam had already planned the entry point, an old maintenance tunnel on the far side of the property that would allow them to slip past security undetected. Ethan took the lead, moving with quiet precision as he scoped out the guards. Marcus and Sam followed closely behind, their movements synchronized. Each step was calculated, the tension in the air rising with every passing second. They reached the tunnel entrance undetected, and Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. But as soon as they entered the dark, damp passageway, the unease returned. There was no turning back now. Inside, the air was thick and musty, the sound of water dripping echoing off the stone walls. Sam led the way, her senses sharp as ever, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. She wasn't sure why, but something didn't sit right. They moved deeper into the compound, avoiding security cameras and motion sensors. As they approached the main building, Sam signaled for a pause. There were more guards up ahead, and they needed to plan their next move. "What's the situation?" Sam asked in a whisper. Ethan and Marcus were crouched, checking their gear. "We're almost at the main building. There's a back entrance near the garage that we can use to slip inside," Ethan replied. Sam nodded. Keep it tight. We don't have the luxury of making noise. Just as they were about to move out, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Sam's heart skipped a beat, and her instincts kicked into overdrive. Without a word, she motioned for the team to fall back into the shadows. They waited, breathless, as a group of mercenaries passed them by, unaware of their presence. But just as Sam was about to relax, one of the men paused. He glanced toward the shadows where they were hiding. Sam's pulse raced. The mercenary took a step closer, and Sam held her breath. This was it. If he turned around, they would be caught. But then, out of nowhere, a muffled shot rang out. The mercenary crumpled to the ground, his body hitting the floor with a soft thud. Who the hell? Marcus started, but Sam was already moving. Go. Now, she hissed, her voice low and urgent. They dashed down the hallway toward the back entrance, where a figure stepped from the shadows. It was Westbrook, holding a silenced pistol, his face hard with determination. You're welcome, he said with a grin that sent a chill down Sam's spine. Why the hell are you here? Sam snapped, her voice low but full of fury. Westbrook shrugged, lowering his weapon. I told you I'd help. You don't think I was going to leave you out here on your own, did you? Sam's eyes narrowed. This wasn't part of the plan. It is now, Westbrook replied, his tone cold. You're too deep in this. Duran's not just a target. He's a trap. If you think you're just walking in there and getting him without consequence, you're wrong. Sam's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. So, what's the play then? Westbrook's eyes gleamed with cold amusement. We finish this together. The real fight starts now. The tension in the air was palpable as Sam and the team followed Westbrook deeper into the heart of Duran's compound. The unexpected arrival of their former ally had thrown a wrench in their carefully laid plans, but now wasn't the time for questions. The mission had changed, and they needed to move fast. Westbrook led the way, his movements fluid and calculated, as though he'd done this countless times before. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding back, that there was something more to this than he was letting on. But for now, her focus had to remain on the task at hand. This way, Westbrook whispered, pointing to a narrow hallway that led toward the main control room. We'll take them by surprise. Duran won't know what hit him. Sam shot him a glance, her eyes narrowing. We're not here to just surprise him. We need intel. We need to find out who's running the show. Westbrook didn't respond, but he knew she was right. The network they were after was far bigger than Duran. The man was a piece of a much larger puzzle, and without the right pieces, they wouldn't be able to put it all together. As they moved down the hallway, Sam couldn't help but think of the risks they were taking. She had already lost so much, her trust in others, her sense of security, and now she was once again walking into the unknown. This time, though, there was no room for mistakes. The control room was locked tight, but Westbrook had already bypassed the security system. They slipped inside quietly, each member of the team taking up positions near the walls, waiting for Sam's signal. Duran's men were everywhere, and the closer they got to the heart of the compound, the more dangerous it became. But this was it. The intel they needed was just on the other side of the room. Westbrook approached the main terminal, his fingers flying over the keys as he worked to extract the data they needed. Sam watched his every move, her mind running through possible escape routes and contingencies in case things went south. This is it, Westbrook muttered, pulling up a series of files on the screen. Everything you need to know about Duran, Kane, and the people at the top. But as Sam stepped forward to examine the screen, something caught her eye, a file that didn't belong. It was buried deep in the system, hidden from plain sight. The title of the file was simple, Project Red Dawn. What's this? Sam asked, her voice low. Westbrook froze, his face betraying nothing. It's nothing, he said quickly, reaching for the mouse to minimize the file. Sam's hand shot out, stopping him before he could hide it. You said we were here to get information on Duran. Why is this file here? What's Project Red Dawn? For a moment, Westbrook didn't answer. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as though something heavy was pressing down on them. Westbrook, Sam's voice was steel now. He sighed, finally turning to face her. It's classified, he said, his voice guarded. It's nothing you need to worry about. But Sam wasn't buying it. She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. I need to know now. If we're doing this together, I need to trust you. Westbrook hesitated, then slowly opened the file, revealing a series of encrypted documents. The title at the top of the screen made Sam's stomach churn. Operation Overwatch, a new order. This is why I've been tracking Kane for so long, Westbrook said, his voice low. Project Red Dawn was supposed to be a classified government operation, a covert initiative to infiltrate and manipulate criminal networks. But somewhere along the way, it went rogue. The project was hijacked, and now it's being used to fund a much larger agenda. Sam's mind raced. A larger agenda? What are you talking about? Westbrook turned back to the screen, scrolling through the files. The people who are pulling the strings behind Kane's network, these are the real players. Military contractors, high-ranking politicians, tech moguls. This goes all the way to the top. Sam felt her blood run cold. So this isn't just about taking down Kane. This is about stopping a whole network of people who are running the world, Westbrook finished for her. And Kane is just a small piece of it. The real goal of Project Red Dawn is to destabilize governments, manipulate the stock market, and control the flow of information. They're trying to build a new world order, and they've been using criminal networks like Duran's to fund it all. Sam felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting. All this time, she had been chasing down bikers, criminals, and mercenaries, but the true enemy had been hiding in plain sight. This wasn't just a fight against one man. It was a battle against an entire system. Sam's head was spinning as she absorbed the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival, about protecting the world from forces that were so powerful they could destroy everything she had ever fought for. Westbrook, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. How do we stop them? Westbrook didn't answer immediately, instead turning back to the computer. There's more. If we take down Duran, we'll have a chance to expose the network. But it won't be easy. They're watching us. We're already on their radar. Sam nodded, taking in the information. She knew they had no time to waste. But if they were going to pull this off, they had to move quickly and carefully. We need to get out of here, Sam said, her tone decisive. If we stay any longer, we're going to have more than just Duran's men on our backs. Ethan nodded in agreement. We'll grab the intel, extract Duran, and get out before they realize we're here. The team moved quickly, securing the files and preparing to make their escape. But just as they reached the door, a loud crash echoed through the compound, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. They know we're here, Marcus said, his voice tense. Sam didn't hesitate. We need to move now. They made their way down the hall, moving fast, when Sam's radio crackled to life. It was Westbrook. We've got a problem, he said, his voice urgent. They've got eyes everywhere. We're surrounded. Sam's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I thought we had a plan. There's no plan anymore, Westbrook replied, his voice colder than before. You're walking into a trap, Sam. The line went dead. Sam's grip tightened around her weapon. This wasn't just a fight for intel anymore. It was a fight for survival. Sam's pulse hammered in her ears as the weight of Westbrook's words settled in. They were walking straight into a trap, one that had been meticulously set, and they hadn't seen it coming. The walls of the compound seemed to close in around them, and the quiet hum of the air conditioning felt like an ominous backdrop to the growing tension. Ethan motioned to the team to move faster. We need to get to the exit. Now. Not without Duran, Sam replied firmly, her voice low but determined. They couldn't leave without the man who held the keys to the whole operation. Duran was the linchpin, and no matter how dire the situation had become, she wasn't backing down. As they pushed forward, the sounds of distant gunfire echoed, the unmistakable sound of boots pounding against the floor signaling that they weren't the only ones on the move. We're running out of time, Marcus said, his voice tight with urgency. If Westbrook's right, we're not just up against Duran's men anymore. This goes much deeper. Sam didn't answer. She could already feel the weight of it, the trap, the stakes, and the knowledge that the real enemy was far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. But there was no turning back now. They reached the central courtyard, and Sam froze. Ahead, she saw a group of mercenaries, their weapons drawn, blocking the way. Westbrook had been right. They were surrounded. The silence that followed was thick with tension. No one moved. Sam's heart raced, her instinct screaming at her to take action. "Sam," Marcus said quietly, "we need to get out of here before—" Before he could finish, a voice rang out from the shadows. "You really thought you could take me down that easily?" Sam's blood ran cold. From the darkness stepped Duran, a cold smirk twisting his lips. Behind him were several of his men, all armed and ready for a fight. "Duran," Sam said, her voice steady despite the situation. "I'm not here to negotiate. We both know what's at stake." Duran chuckled, stepping forward. "You think you're the first to come after me? I've had armies try to take me down, and they all failed. You're just another name on a long list of people who don't understand who you're dealing with. Then why don't you make this easy?" Sam shot back, her hand hovering near her weapon. "We'll end this here, or you'll make the biggest mistake of your life." Duran's smirk faltered, replaced by something darker. "You think you've got the upper hand? Let's see if you're ready for what's coming next." Suddenly, the sound of more footsteps filled the air, and Sam's instincts kicked in. She raised her weapon just as a group of heavily armed men emerged from the shadows. They were trapped. Without warning, all hell broke loose. Gunfire rang out, and Sam dove for cover, signaling for her team to move. The courtyard erupted into chaos as Duran's men opened fire, their shots echoing off the walls. Ethan returned fire, his accuracy deadly, while Marcus moved swiftly to flank the enemy, his combat skills honed to perfection. Sam's eyes scanned the scene, searching for an escape route, but the walls were closing in. She ducked behind a pillar, narrowly avoiding a bullet that skimmed past her ear. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and the sound of shouting men. Sam's mind raced as she calculated their options. "We need to get out," Marcus shouted over the noise. "There's no way we can fight our way out of this. Not with Duran here." Sam knew he was right. They needed a plan, fast. But the more she looked at Duran, the more she realized something wasn't right. He wasn't just standing there as a villain. He was waiting for something, waiting for them to make the next move. And then, it clicked. "Wait!" Sam shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This isn't just about us. It's about the files we took. Duran doesn't care about us. He wants the intel." Her words were met with silence for a moment, but the realization hit her team like a punch to the gut. Duran wasn't just trying to kill them. He was trying to stop them from getting away with the data they had just stolen. "Get the files to the van." Sam barked, urgency in her voice. Ethan and Marcus immediately began moving toward the exit, but Duran's men closed in, their weapons trained on the team. Sam moved swiftly, taking out 2 guards with quick shots before making her own dash toward the van. She could feel the weight of the files in her jacket. This was their only leverage. But just as they reached the door, a loud voice rang out. "Stop right there." It was Westbrook, stepping from the shadows, his face hard and calculating. "I don't think you're going anywhere, Sam." Sam's heart dropped. The last person she had expected to turn on them had just revealed his true colors. "What the hell, Westbrook?" Sam demanded, her voice laced with disbelief. "You're with him? After everything we've been through?" Westbrook didn't flinch. "I told you, Sam. I'm here to win. I've been playing this game longer than you've been alive. You were always just a pawn in a much bigger scheme. You're working for them?" Ethan's voice was cold, filled with contempt. Westbrook's eyes flickered toward Duran, who smirked at the revelation. "I don't work for anyone, Ethan. But let's just say the enemy of my enemy is my ally." Sam felt the weight of betrayal like a physical blow. "You sold us out. For what?" "For power," Westbrook replied, his voice smooth. "And for the future. You're just too idealistic to see it, Sam. But when the dust settles, I'll be the one standing on top." As Westbrook turned to leave, Sam made a split-second decision. She couldn't let him walk away with the information. "Not today, Westbrook," Sam growled, raising her gun. But just as she pulled the trigger, Duran's men surged forward, blocking the shot and pulling Sam into the chaos once again. The fight was far from over, and now Sam was playing for more than just survival. She was fighting for her future, and the future of everyone who depended on her. The world had become a blur of chaos and confusion as Sam fought tooth and nail to keep herself and her team alive. Westbrook's betrayal had hit hard, but there was no time to dwell on it now. Every moment was a battle, every corner a potential death trap. The weight of the stolen intel pressed against her chest like a ticking time bomb, and with Duran's men closing in, the stakes had never been higher. Gunfire rang out from every direction as Sam ducked behind a concrete pillar, her fingers trembling but steady on the trigger. The sound of boots pounding against the floor echoed through the courtyard as she peered out, scanning for any sign of movement. "We need to regroup," Marcus shouted, his voice rising over the din of battle. "We can't take them all on at once." Sam's eyes darted across the yard, assessing their options. The door to the control room was locked, and the entrance to the back alleyway was blocked. It was only a matter of time before Duran's men would surround them completely. But Sam wasn't giving up. Not now. She reached for her radio. "Ethan, what's the status on the van? Are we clear to move?" There was a brief silence before Ethan's voice crackled through the speaker. "Negative, Sam. We're pinned down. Westbrook's men are all over the place. We need a diversion now." Sam's mind raced. She couldn't let them get away with the intel, not after everything they'd risked to get it. They were playing for keeps, and she had to think fast. "Marcus, you take the left side." "I'll cover you," Sam ordered, her voice low but commanding. "We'll give Ethan the window he needs to get to the van." Marcus nodded, already moving toward the left flank with silent precision. Sam's eyes flickered over to the right, where Duran's men were closing in. A series of quick movements, coordinated and calculated. This was her world. The adrenaline surged through her, sharpening her senses. This was the moment she'd been trained for, the moment everything could change. She raised her gun, taking out 2 guards with swift, accurate shots before signaling to Marcus. "Go!" They moved as one, each step calculated, each movement designed to give them a few extra seconds of freedom. But Duran's men weren't stupid. They were closing in fast, and the longer they stayed, the tighter the noose around them became. Just as they reached the alley, Sam heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. Without turning, she knew what it was. Westbrook. He had come for the files. Sam's heart pounded. She didn't have time to waste on him now, but she couldn't let him walk away with what they'd fought so hard to steal. She spun around just as Westbrook appeared from the shadows, his gun trained on her. His face was cold, calculated, a far cry from the ally she once trusted. "Westbrook, you don't want to do this," Sam said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the blood pounding in her ears. "You've already made your choice." "I've always known what's best for me," Westbrook replied, his voice sharp and confident. "And you're not part of that future." He pulled the trigger. Sam barely had time to react, ducking behind a stack of crates as the bullet ricocheted off the concrete, just missing her by inches. Her heart slammed against her ribcage as she rolled to the side, taking cover behind the nearest wall. She was alive, but she knew the next move had to be decisive. "You're not going anywhere, Westbrook," Sam yelled, her voice fierce. "This ends now." There was a moment of hesitation before Westbrook stepped out from behind the corner, his eyes narrowing as he weighed his options. He clearly thought he was in control, but Sam had a different idea. In one fluid motion, Sam surged forward, a burst of energy fueled by desperation and the need to survive. She launched herself at Westbrook, knocking him off balance and forcing him to drop his weapon. They struggled on the ground, each of them fighting for dominance. Sam's muscles burned with the effort, but she knew she couldn't back down. "Not now. Get off me," Westbrook snarled, trying to push her away, but Sam's grip tightened on his collar, forcing him to look into her eyes. "This is for all the lives you've ruined," Sam growled through clenched teeth. Westbrook let out a curse, but Sam wasn't done. With a final, decisive movement, she slammed her elbow into his chest, knocking the wind out of him. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, while Sam took a step back, her weapon drawn. "You're done," she said, voice low. "Stay down." With Westbrook subdued, Sam quickly turned her attention back to the mission. Marcus had already made it to the van, and Ethan was backing him up. They had just a few minutes to get the intel to safety, and maybe, just maybe, they'd have a shot at bringing down Duran's entire operation. But the sound of approaching footsteps sent a chill down Sam's spine. She didn't have much time left. As she sprinted toward the alley, she grabbed the files from her jacket and tucked them into a hidden compartment in the van. The moment they were safely secured, she slammed the door shut and signaled for the team to move. "We're out of time," Ethan muttered, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to go now." Sam didn't argue. They jumped into the van, engine roaring to life as they sped down the alleyway. But just as they turned the corner, the unmistakable sound of gunfire shattered the silence behind them. "We've been compromised," Marcus shouted. "They're on our tail." Sam's grip tightened on the wheel as she pushed the van faster, swerving between obstacles and weaving through the narrow streets. They had one shot, one chance to make it out alive, and she wasn't about to lose it now. The van tore through the streets, weaving through traffic and cutting corners as Sam pushed the limits of the vehicle. Duran's men were relentless in their pursuit, their cars close behind, firing at them with precision. "We can't outrun them," Marcus yelled. "We need to fight back." Sam glanced in the rearview mirror, her pulse racing. Duran's men were closing in fast, but there was one trick left. She slammed the brakes, sending the van into a controlled skid that sent the pursuing vehicles careening into a ditch. The tactic worked, but Sam knew it was only temporary. "We need to get to the extraction point now," Sam barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. Ethan's eyes were wide with fear. "Do you think we can make it?" "We have to." With one final push, Sam floored the gas pedal, leading them toward the only hope of escape. The odds were against them, but for Sam and her team, there was no turning back. The van hurtled down the narrow, winding streets, the roar of the engine and the screech of tires mingling with the gunfire from behind. Sam's heart was pounding in her chest, each beat an echo of the high-stakes gamble they were playing. The city's labyrinthine alleyways blurred in the rearview mirror as they raced toward the extraction point, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. "Hold on," Sam yelled over the sound of the engine, her hands gripped firmly on the wheel. She swerved around another corner, narrowly avoiding a collision with a parked truck. "We're not going to make it if we don't slow down," Marcus shouted from the back, his voice tinged with panic. "We're driving right into a trap." Sam's jaw tightened. Marcus was right. They were pushing their luck. The streets were getting more desolate, and the sounds of pursuit were growing louder. Their options were narrowing, and soon they'd be boxed in. But turning back wasn't an option. Not with the intel they had. "Trust me," Sam said, her eyes locked on the road ahead. "We're almost there." Behind them, the sound of screeching tires and revving engines told her they weren't as alone as they'd hoped. Duran's men had caught up, and they were closing in fast. Suddenly, a black SUV swerved into their path, blocking the road ahead. Sam's reflexes kicked in, and she jerked the wheel to the left, sending the van into a sharp turn. The tires squealed as they slid, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision with the SUV. "Sam, we need to take them out." Ethan's voice was tight with urgency. "We can't outrun them forever." She didn't need to be told twice. Sam floored the gas pedal, taking a sharp left into an alleyway, hoping to shake their pursuers. The van bounced as it hit the uneven pavement, but she kept it steady, praying they could reach the extraction point in one piece. The alleyway was tight, with barely enough room for the van to pass through. But the sound of the SUVs behind them told Sam that Duran's men weren't about to let them slip away unnoticed. The moment they emerged from the alley, they'd be wide open for an attack. "We need to fight," Sam said, her mind working at lightning speed. "Marcus, Ethan, get ready. We're going to need cover." The men in the back braced themselves, ready for whatever was coming. As they neared the end of the alley, Sam saw a glimmer of hope, a roadblock set up ahead by the extraction team. A few more seconds, and they'd be in the clear. But first, they had to deal with Duran's men. Sam veered the van to the left, heading toward a row of abandoned buildings. Her mind raced as she realized what she had to do. It was a risk, a big one, but it might be their only shot. "Everyone, brace yourselves," Sam shouted. Without warning, she turned the wheel sharply to the right, sending the van crashing through a gate and into an empty lot. The tires screeched as the van slid to a stop behind a row of dumpsters. "Move, move, move!" Sam yelled as she and her team scrambled out of the van, weapons drawn. They ducked behind the cover of the dumpsters, scanning the area for signs of movement. The sounds of engines revving and tires screeching told them Duran's men had seen them. They weren't going down without a fight. From the other side of the lot, headlights appeared, 2 SUVs speeding toward them. Sam's grip tightened around her gun. "We hold them off until the extraction team gets here," she said through clenched teeth. The first SUV skidded to a halt, and immediately, the doors flew open, revealing Duran's heavily armed men. Sam raised her weapon, firing first. The sound of the shots rang out, the bullets finding their marks as 2 of Duran's men dropped to the ground. "Nice shot," Ethan called out from behind cover, but Sam barely acknowledged him. Her eyes were locked on the remaining men. Another SUV pulled up behind the first, and more men poured out, their weapons raised. Sam's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through her veins. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had one advantage: surprise. Sam peeked out from behind the dumpster, taking another shot. One of Duran's men fell, but the rest ducked behind their vehicles, returning fire. The staccato rhythm of gunfire filled the air as Sam and her team fought back, trying to hold off the advancing attackers. "They're not backing down," Marcus shouted, his voice strained. "We need a plan, Sam." Sam's mind raced as she took cover behind a stack of crates. They were running out of time. "Ethan, Marcus, go for the SUV on the left." "I'll cover you," Sam ordered. Without waiting for a reply, she peeked over the edge of the crates and fired a shot that took out one of the men aiming at them. "Go!" she yelled. And without hesitation, Ethan and Marcus charged toward the SUV on the left, their weapons raised. Sam's eyes never left their movements, making sure they were covered as they moved. The seconds felt like hours. Just as she was about to signal for them to fall back, the sound of another vehicle roaring toward them echoed from behind. Sam's heart sank as she saw a third SUV barreling down the street. It was too much. They were going to be overwhelmed. But then, just as the situation seemed hopeless, a sudden explosion rocked the ground. The shockwave sent Sam stumbling backward, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow. The explosion had come from the direction of the roadblock, and in that moment, Sam realized the extraction team had arrived. The attackers' SUVs were thrown into disarray, their drivers distracted by the sudden chaos. "Get to the van now!" a voice shouted from the shadows. It was the extraction team. They had made it just in time. Sam didn't hesitate. She motioned for her team to follow her, and they sprinted toward the extraction van, ducking behind cover and firing off a few more shots to keep Duran's men at bay. As they reached the van, Sam's eyes flicked back to the chaos behind them. Duran's men were still regrouping, but the extraction team was already laying down cover fire. "We're not out of the woods yet," Marcus shouted as he jumped into the van. Sam followed closely behind, slamming the door shut as the van roared to life. The tires screeched as the vehicle tore away, heading for the safety of the roadblock and the cover of the extraction team. For a moment, Sam allowed herself to breathe, just a little. They were alive, and the mission had been a success. But deep down, she knew the fight wasn't over. Duran would come for them again, and when he did, they would be ready. The van sped through the city's deserted streets, its tires kicking up clouds of dust as it raced toward the extraction point. Sam's pulse was still running high, the adrenaline of the fight coursing through her veins. Her mind buzzed with the events of the past few hours: Westbrook's betrayal, Duran's relentless pursuit, and the narrow escape they'd just pulled off. They had the intel, and they had their lives, but everything had changed. "Nice work back there," Marcus said, his voice low but appreciative as he leaned against the side of the van. He had a cut on his cheek, blood drying against his skin, but he seemed unfazed. Sam didn't respond immediately. She was still processing the fight, the way everything had escalated so quickly. But Marcus was right about one thing. They'd done what they set out to do. They had the intel, and they were alive to tell the story. "Thanks," Sam muttered. She let out a long breath and focused on the road ahead, trying to shake off the feeling that everything was still far from over. The extraction point wasn't far now, a safe house on the outskirts of the city where they would debrief and lay low for a while. But Sam's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the image of Westbrook's face, the way he'd looked at her, cold and calculating. She thought they were allies, that they were fighting for the same cause. But she'd been wrong. He had used her. He'd used them all. "Do you think we can trust the extraction team?" Ethan asked from the back seat, his voice cutting through her thoughts. Sam hesitated. The extraction team had been a last-minute call, and while they had shown up just in time, there was something about the whole situation that didn't sit right with her. "I don't know," Sam admitted. "But right now, we don't have much of a choice." Ethan nodded, but didn't look convinced. The safe house came into view just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. It was an old farmhouse, tucked away behind high fences and dense trees. The perfect place to lay low for a while. As the van pulled into the driveway, Sam saw the extraction team's vehicle parked by the side of the house. Two men stood outside, their postures tense as they surveyed the area. They weren't taking any chances, and neither were Sam and her team. The van came to a stop, and Sam's hand instinctively went to her gun as she unbuckled her seatbelt. She didn't trust these men. Not yet. "Stay sharp," Sam ordered, her voice low but firm. The team followed her lead, unloading from the van with practiced precision. They moved quickly, scanning the perimeter as they approached the farmhouse. As Sam entered the house, she felt the weight of the intel in her jacket, its significance more pressing than ever. They had the evidence to take down Duran and his entire operation. But Sam couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger at play, something more dangerous than even Duran's men. The extraction team's leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward to greet them. His eyes were cold, calculating, and his handshake was firm but impersonal. "Glad to see you made it out alive," he said, his voice gravelly. "We'll need to secure the intel before we make our next move." Sam didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced over at her team, her eyes narrowing. There was something about the way the man spoke, something that made her uneasy. "You're sure no one followed us?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The man gave a quick nod, but his eyes flickered for just a moment. It was enough to make Sam's suspicion grow. "We've got everything under control," he said, a bit too smoothly. "Now, let's get that intel secured." The next few hours passed in relative silence as they secured the safe house and set up for their debrief. Sam kept to herself, keeping an eye on the extraction team while her team prepared the intel for review. She knew better than to trust too easily, especially when things seemed too quiet. Ethan and Marcus sat at a table, looking over the files, while Sam stood near the window, watching the night fall. The silence was oppressive, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. That's when it came. The sound of footsteps. Sam's instincts kicked in, and she turned, eyes scanning the room. The extraction team's leader, the man with the scar, was standing in the doorway, his expression cold and unreadable. "Everything all right?" Sam asked, her voice sharp. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past her, his eyes narrowing at the files on the table. "I think we need to have a conversation about what's next," he said, his voice low and steady. Sam's heart rate spiked. She had a bad feeling about this. "You don't need to worry about what's next," she said, her voice hard. "We've got the intel. Our job is done." For a moment, the man said nothing. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving Sam's. "I'm afraid your job isn't over," he said, his voice carrying a subtle threat. The tension in the room thickened. Sam could feel the weight of his words, the unspoken meaning behind them. She wasn't sure what he was implying, but she didn't like it. Before she could respond, the door behind her burst open. A shout rang out, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Sam's reflexes took over, and she dove to the ground, grabbing her gun and rolling to her feet in one fluid motion. "Get down!" she yelled, pulling Ethan and Marcus to the floor as the safe house was suddenly under siege. Gunshots echoed through the house, the walls shaking with each blast. Sam's heart pounded in her chest as she grabbed the files and pushed them into Marcus's hands. "Take the intel and get to the back," she ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos. "I'll cover you." As Marcus and Ethan scrambled toward the back exit, Sam turned to face the extraction team's leader, who was already drawing his weapon. "You've made a big mistake," Sam said, her eyes burning with fury. The man smirked, his gun raised. "I'm afraid you're the one who's made the mistake, Sam. This isn't about Duran anymore. It's about who controls the power." And with that, the fight for survival began again. The sound of gunfire still echoed in Sam's ears as she sprinted through the house, heart pounding. She could feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through her, but there was no time to waste. The extraction team had just turned on them, and the intel, the very reason they'd risked everything, was now in danger of being lost. As Sam rounded a corner, she saw Marcus and Ethan ducking behind a stack of crates in the back room, their guns drawn. They weren't taking any chances. The two of them had already become experts at reacting under fire, but Sam knew this was different. They had no idea who they were really up against now. "Sam!" Marcus shouted as she approached. "What the hell is going on? Who are these guys?" Sam's eyes narrowed. She had a pretty good idea, but no one had said it out loud yet. She wasn't sure if she was ready to say it either. "They're not who they claim to be," she said, her voice tight. "That man with the scar, he's with someone much bigger than Duran." Ethan cursed under his breath, glancing nervously toward the door. "Then we're in serious trouble. They're not just after the intel, they're after us." "We need to get out of here," Sam replied. "Take the intel and find the extraction point. I'll cover the rear." Marcus and Ethan didn't argue. They grabbed the files and moved quickly to the back door, but as they approached the exit, the sound of boots on the floor grew louder. Someone was coming. "Get down," Sam shouted, pushing them to the floor as she raised her weapon. The back door crashed open just as Sam squeezed the trigger. The first man, dressed in dark tactical gear, dropped to the ground with a muffled grunt. But more were coming, flooding into the room with weapons raised. "Get them," someone shouted from the doorway. Sam fired again, taking down another attacker. But she knew they were outnumbered. It wouldn't be long before they were surrounded. "Go!" she yelled, her voice a mix of urgency and command. "Take the side alley. I'll hold them off." Without hesitation, Marcus and Ethan bolted for the side door, but Sam stayed behind, taking a last shot at the advancing enemies before slamming the door shut. The sound of gunfire filled the air as Sam sprinted to the other side of the building. Her mind was racing, calculating her next move. She couldn't let the intel fall into the wrong hands, not now. Sam's heart thudded in her chest as she crouched behind the cover of an overturned table, the air thick with the stench of gunpowder. She wasn't sure how long she had before reinforcements arrived, but she knew she couldn't wait to find out. With a deep breath, she peeked around the edge, scanning the shadows for movement. She spotted two men moving cautiously through the hallway, weapons raised. Sam didn't hesitate. She fired first, taking down one of the men before rolling to the side and firing again, sending the second attacker sprawling. She had no time to savor the victory. The sound of more boots echoed from down the hall, and Sam cursed under her breath. She was running out of options. Her eyes flicked toward the window, her only way out, but as she started to make her way toward it, the sound of footsteps froze her in her tracks. The man with the scar was standing in the doorway, his gun aimed directly at her. "Not so fast," he said, his voice low and calm. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Sam's hand tightened on her weapon. "You won't get away with this," she shot back, her eyes never leaving his. "Oh, I think we both know that's not true," the man replied with a chilling smile. "You're too late. The people I work for, Duran is just a pawn in a much bigger game. And now, you're part of it too." Sam's stomach twisted. She wasn't hearing this wrong, was she? "What do you mean?" The man stepped closer, his voice growing colder. "There's something you don't know, Sam. Duran wasn't the real target. You were." Her heart skipped a beat. "What?" "You were part of the plan all along," he continued, his voice almost pitying. "You and your team. You've been played from the beginning." Sam's mind raced. She'd been trusting the wrong people this entire time. The intel, the mission, everything had been a setup. Sam's body went cold as the realization hit her. They had never been after Duran. The real target had been her, and they'd been setting her up from the start. "Why me?" Sam demanded, her voice tight with fury. What the hell do you want from me? The man with the scar paused, his expression unreadable. You were the key. All the pieces were in place. But now, it's all about finishing what we started. Before Sam could respond, another explosion rattled the house, shaking the walls and sending dust falling from the ceiling. The man with the scar stumbled back, momentarily distracted. Sam seized the opportunity. She dove for her weapon and fired, hitting him square in the chest. His eyes widened in shock as he fell to the ground, but Sam didn't stop. She grabbed the intel files and bolted for the window. As Sam crashed through the window, she hit the ground running. The night air was cool against her skin, but there was no time to waste. Her team was still out there, and she had to get to them before it was too late. The sounds of pursuit were close behind, and Sam's pulse raced as she sprinted through the darkened streets. She couldn't afford to let them catch up. The information in her hands was too important to lose. Her mind raced with questions. Who was pulling the strings? Who had set them all up? And most importantly, who could she trust now? As she turned the corner, she saw Marcus and Ethan ahead, waiting for her. They had made it to the extraction point, but the danger was far from over. Sam! Marcus shouted, his voice tight with concern. What the hell happened? She didn't answer right away. She just held out the files. We've got a bigger problem than we thought, she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. And it's not just Duran. There's a force behind all of this. Someone who's been pulling the strings from the very beginning. Ethan's eyes widened. Who? Sam shook her head. I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. And when we do, we're going to bring them down. As the night stretched on, Sam knew this was just the beginning of a much larger fight. They had survived the first battle, but the war was far from over. The shadows of the night seemed to grow longer as Sam, Marcus, and Ethan made their way through the alleyways, moving quickly and quietly. The streets were still and empty, but every footstep felt like a drumbeat echoing in Sam's chest. They'd made it out of the safe house, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. Her mind raced as they neared the extraction point. The files she held were more than just intel. They were a key to something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. She could feel the weight of that truth pressing down on her shoulders. We need to lay low, find a safe house, Marcus said, his voice low and cautious. Sam nodded, but she didn't stop moving. The longer we stay in one place, the more likely they'll find us. We can't afford that right now. Ethan's hand tightened around his weapon as he glanced over his shoulder. We're gonna need backup. We can't take on a whole army by ourselves. Sam's jaw tightened. We don't have time for backup. We need to get these files to someone we can trust, and we need to do it fast. I'm done running. They reached the extraction point, an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, just as the first rays of dawn began to pierce the sky. The area was quiet, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She motioned for the team to move inside. The place looked like it had been deserted for years, but it was still the best option they had. Inside, they found a place to regroup, sitting down to catch their breath. Sam kept the files close to her chest, unwilling to let them out of her sight. She needed to figure out their next move. I can't believe we've been played like this, Marcus muttered, slamming his fist against the table. Duran was just a distraction. It was never about him. Ethan leaned back against a nearby wall, his face grim. So, who's behind this? Who's pulling the strings? Sam didn't answer right away. Her mind was working overtime, piecing together the fragmented pieces of the puzzle. Westbrook's betrayal, the extraction team's ambush, the fact that they'd been targeted from the beginning. I don't know, she said finally, but it's big. Too big. She stood up, pacing the room, her mind still whirling. We need to find out who's behind this. We need to track down the source of the intel and figure out who's been controlling everything from the shadows. Marcus shot her a look. You think it's someone in the government? Another organization? Sam paused, considering the possibilities. It could be, but I have a feeling it's more than that. Whoever is behind this has the resources to make things disappear. People, information, entire operations. We're just pawns in their game. Ethan pushed off the wall, his voice sharp. Then it's not just about taking down Duran. It's about something much larger, something we don't fully understand. Sam's eyes flickered to the files. Exactly. And until we know who's pulling the strings, we can't trust anyone, not even ourselves. The next few hours passed in a blur of planning and quiet tension. They couldn't stay in the warehouse for long. Too many risks, too many chances of being found. Sam knew they needed to make contact with someone who could help them, but she wasn't sure who to trust. Every lead felt like a dead end. Every person she had relied on could be compromised. "I've got an old contact we can reach out to," Marcus said suddenly, breaking the silence. "He's ex-military, knows a lot of people. If anyone can help us, it's him." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Who is he?" Marcus hesitated. "His name's David Price. He's not exactly on the grid, but he's been around. He's got the kind of connections we need to figure out what's going on." Sam thought for a moment. Price wasn't exactly the type of person she would have called in the past, but desperate times called for desperate measures. If he could get them the answers they needed, it would be worth the risk. "All right," Sam said finally, her voice steady. "We'll reach out to him. But if this turns out to be another setup, I'm holding you responsible." Marcus nodded, a rare seriousness in his expression. "Fair enough." Ethan stood up. "When do we make contact?" "We leave now," Sam said, her tone final. "The longer we wait, the more likely they'll catch up to us." The contact was set up through a secure channel, but Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as they made their way to a secluded location on the edge of town. Marcus had arranged for them to meet David Price in an abandoned garage, a place where no one would think to look for them. As they approached, Sam's hand instinctively went to her weapon. The uneasy feeling in her stomach had grown. They had no idea who this man really was, and whether he could be trusted. They stepped into the garage, the heavy door creaking as it opened. The place was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls. In the far corner, a man sat on a crate, his back to them. He was tall, his posture relaxed, but there was something dangerous about the way he carried himself. "You must be Sam," the man said, turning slowly to face them. His voice was gravelly, worn from years of hard living. "I've heard a lot about you." Sam didn't answer right away. She kept her eyes on him, watching for any sign of a threat. "You're David Price?" she asked, her tone cold. He smirked. "The one and only. You've got questions, and I've got answers. But first, let's make sure we're on the same side." He stood up and took a step toward them, his eyes scanning the group. There was something in his gaze, something calculating, like he was weighing their every move. "You've been caught in something much bigger than you realize," Price continued. "And if you're not careful, it'll swallow you whole." Sam's jaw tightened. "We're not here for a warning. We're here for information." Price raised an eyebrow, as if amused by her bluntness. "Fine, but be careful what you ask for. There's a lot of blood on the line here, and when you start pulling on the threads, you might not like what unravels." He paused for a moment, his gaze flickering over the group. "I know who's behind it all, but you might not be ready to hear the truth." Sam's heart raced. She had no idea what he meant, but she was ready to hear it. Whatever it took to end this. Sam's heart pounded as she stood in the dimly lit garage, staring at David Price. The weight of his words hung in the air like a heavy fog. He claimed to know who was behind everything, the strings that had been pulled to bring them all to this point. But Sam wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth, even if it could bring them one step closer to the answers they desperately needed. "Who's pulling the strings, Price?" Sam asked, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of urgency. She couldn't afford to waste time here. Price smirked, leaning against a rusted workbench. "I could tell you, Sam, but that wouldn't do you any good. Not yet, at least. You're not ready for it." Marcus's hand tightened around the grip of his weapon, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, not ready?" "We're running out of time here. You either tell us, or we leave and find someone else who will." Price raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, no need to get hostile. I'm just trying to keep you alive." He eyed Sam carefully, as though measuring her every reaction. "This isn't the kind of information you just drop on someone. You need to understand what you're up against first." Sam took a step forward, her patience wearing thin. "I don't have time for games. You either tell me who's behind this, or I find someone else who will. No more delays. For a long moment, Price just stared at her, his eyes calculating. Finally, he nodded. All right, he said with a sigh. But understand this, you're going to have to make a choice. A big one. And once you know the truth, there's no going back. You'll either be part of the solution or part of the problem. Sam's mind raced. She didn't have time for cryptic warnings. She needed to know what was going on, who was after them, and how they could end it. We're listening, Marcus said, his voice tense. Price sighed again, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Then, finally, he spoke. It's not just about power or money, Sam. It's about control. The people behind this, they've been playing a game for a long time. The world is their chessboard, and you and your team? You're pawns. Sam's stomach churned. Who are they? Price looked around, almost as if making sure no one was listening, before he leaned in closer. The organization you've been chasing, the one that goes by so many names, Duran was just the tip of the iceberg. But it's bigger than even Duran. The real power, the ones pulling the strings, is a covert faction within the government. They've infiltrated every level, military, intelligence, corporations. It's not just a rogue operation. It's a new kind of war. A war for control, but this time, they want to control everything. Sam felt a chill run down her spine. She had suspected something larger was at play, but she hadn't prepared herself for this. Are you telling me the government is behind all of this? Sam asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. Price nodded grimly. Yes, but it's not just any government faction. It's a shadow organization, so well hidden that most people don't even know it exists. They've been orchestrating conflicts, manipulating information, and controlling people for years. They create chaos so they can profit from the destruction. They're playing all sides, and they're damn good at it. Ethan stepped forward, his face a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. If that's true, why haven't they come after us directly? Why go through Duran and all the theatrics? Because they needed you, Ethan, Price replied with a sardonic smile. They needed you to believe you were doing something noble. They needed you to chase after ghosts and get entangled in their web. The only reason you're alive right now is because you've been playing right into their hands. Marcus scowled, stepping in front of Sam protectively. So we're just pawns in their game? Is that it? Price shrugged. You could be more than that. But first, you need to understand what you're up against. Sam's mind was spinning. The notion that an entire faction within the government could be behind everything they had been through, manipulating them like pieces on a chessboard, was overwhelming. But deep down, she knew it made sense. Nothing about this operation had been straightforward. And now it all became clear. There was far more at stake than just getting the intel. So what's the next step? Sam asked, her voice sharper than before. Price's face darkened, and for the first time, there was a hint of regret in his expression. The next step is something you're not going to like. You're going to have to make a choice. This organization, this faction, they want to rewrite the rules of the world. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want. If you want to bring them down, you have to be willing to break the rules too. You'll have to go underground, use tactics they won't expect. And once you're in, there's no turning back. Sam swallowed, her heart pounding. How do we take them down? How do we stop them? Price's eyes flickered with something that could only be described as grim satisfaction. You can't do it by the book. You're going to need to infiltrate their operation from the inside. The files you have, they're not just the key to their secrets. They're a target. And the only way to beat them is to outplay them at their own game. Sam's eyes narrowed. Infiltrate them? How are we supposed to do that? We've been targeted by the people we're trying to stop. Price gave her a long look, his gaze hard. That's where you come in, Sam. You're already a part of their world, and they don't know how deep you've gone yet. You're going to have to work from within, using your connections, your skills. You'll need to find a way to cut off their supply lines, break their hold on the people who work for them. But you can't do it alone. Sam's fists clenched. She had no illusions about how dangerous this was. But the stakes had just become higher than she could have imagined. The enemy wasn't just a group of criminals. It was a force with nearly unlimited power, capable of manipulating everything from behind the scenes. She and her team were going to have to become something they weren't. agents of chaos if they wanted to win. We'll do whatever it takes, Sam said firmly, her voice steely with resolve. But we need your help, Price. You want to live through this? Then you're in it with us. For a long moment, Price said nothing. Then, with a grim nod, he spoke. I'm in. But remember, there's a price for everything. This isn't just a fight for survival. It's a fight for your soul. Sam didn't flinch. We'll pay whatever price it takes. Just show us how to beat them. The rest of the day was a blur of planning, scheming, and gathering information. Price provided them with everything he knew about the covert faction, their operations, their weaknesses, and their strongholds. But he also warned them that there were no guarantees in this fight. Every step would be a gamble, and one wrong move could cost them everything. As night fell again, the team gathered in the makeshift safe house, their minds focused and ready. Sam held the intel tightly in her hands. She knew this wasn't just about fighting for their lives anymore. It was about bringing down an empire of lies and deceit. The real war starts now, Sam said, her voice steady as she looked at each of her teammates. Marcus nodded, his jaw set. Let's finish this. Ethan didn't say anything, but the fire in his eyes told Sam everything she needed to know. They were all in this together. The days blurred into nights as Sam and her team worked tirelessly to track down the people behind the shadowy faction Price had revealed. The plan had taken shape, but each step forward felt like they were walking through a minefield. Every piece of information they uncovered led to more questions, more danger. Sam had known this wasn't going to be easy, but the weight of the mission was starting to settle heavily on her shoulders. Marcus was the first to speak, breaking the silence that had settled between them. We're getting close, Sam. Too close. The more we dig, the more it feels like we're being watched. Like we're walking right into their trap. Sam's brow furrowed as she studied the intel they had gathered. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being baited, but at the same time, they had no choice but to keep pushing forward. They had no idea who they could trust anymore. Price had been their one ally, but even he had warned them that their next steps would come with consequences. We keep moving, Sam replied, her voice firm. We don't stop until we have them in our sights. If we hesitate, they'll take us down. We've got one shot at this. Ethan's face was grim as he looked over the maps and coordinates they had gathered. We've pinpointed their main base of operations. It's a heavily fortified compound, deep in the mountains. Getting in won't be easy. We'll need backup. No time for backup, Sam said, her tone sharp. We do this quietly, and we do it fast. We don't have the luxury of waiting for more support. Marcus shot her a look, his expression full of concern. Sam, I know you want to end this, but we're walking into the lion's den. You can't do it alone. We need every advantage we can get. Sam met his gaze, her eyes hard. We don't have any other choice. If we wait too long, they'll find us. We go in, we take them out, and we get the hell out. That's the plan. Ethan nodded, his hands moving over the map, tracing a path into the compound. It's a good plan, but it's also risky. We'll need to hit them fast and hard. One wrong move, and this whole thing blows up in our faces. We're not making any wrong moves, Sam said, her jaw clenched. We know what we're up against. Now we take them down. The hours leading up to the assault felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. Sam couldn't sleep. She sat at the table, going over the details of their mission again and again, making sure every angle was covered. Her mind wouldn't stop racing. Her thoughts a constant whirl of strategy, risk, and the nagging doubt that there was something they weren't seeing. They were about to take on a shadow organization that had control over every aspect of their lives, and Sam knew they were far from prepared for what they might find. She ran her fingers through her hair, her gaze drifting to the files Price had given them. The weight of the situation, the responsibility, the knowledge that one wrong move could cost them everything. It was almost too much to bear. But Sam had no choice. There was no turning back now. A knock at the door broke her from her thoughts. She looked up to see Marcus standing there, his face more serious than usual. You all right? He asked, stepping into the room. Sam gave him a tight smile. Just thinking, about what comes next. Marcus nodded. I get it. This is bigger than we thought. But you've got a plan. We're going to get through this. We have each other's backs. Sam stood up and walked over to him, her eyes searching his face. She knew he was trying to reassure her, but it wasn't enough. She needed to hear it from herself. She needed to believe it. "Do you think we're making the right choice?" Sam asked quietly. "Do you think we can actually take them down?" Marcus paused, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know, Sam, but I know this. If we don't try, they'll just keep winning. They've been pulling the strings for too long, and if we don't stop them now, it'll be too late. This is our fight, and we have to see it through." Sam exhaled slowly. She wanted to believe him, more than anything. But the reality was that they were about to go up against something much larger than themselves. And that thought weighed heavily on her chest. "I'm ready," Sam said finally, her voice steady. "Tomorrow, we finish this." Dawn was just breaking as Sam, Marcus, and Ethan made their way to the compound, the mountains looming ominously in the distance. The air was thick with tension, but there was also a sense of determination in the air. They had come too far to back out now. This was their last chance, and Sam knew they couldn't afford to fail. The plan was simple. Infiltrate the compound, disable their communications, gather the intel they needed, and get out. It was risky, but it was the best they could do with the time they had. Every second counted. As they moved closer to the compound, Sam felt her heart rate quicken. This was it. No more hiding, no more running. They were going in, and they were going to take down the people who had destroyed so many lives. The guards were few, but well-trained. They moved in silence, staying hidden in the shadows as they took out the perimeter security. Marcus led the charge, his movements precise and calculated, while Ethan and Sam followed close behind, covering each other's backs. They made it to the compound's entrance without incident. The heavy metal door loomed before them, and Sam motioned for Ethan to take the lead. He set the charges quickly, the soft hiss of the explosives the only sound in the otherwise still air. The door blew open with a deafening boom, and they rushed inside. The compound was a maze of corridors and rooms, but Sam's training kicked in. She led them through the building, each step bringing them closer to their goal. They were almost there when a voice echoed through the hallway. "Sam!" It was a voice Sam recognized all too well. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned to see a figure standing in the shadows at the end of the hallway. Sam's heart raced as she locked eyes with the figure standing at the end of the hallway. The voice had been familiar, but hearing it now, in this place, felt like a punch to the gut. The figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows into the dim light of the hallway. "Lena?" Sam's voice was barely a whisper, a mixture of disbelief and dread. "What the hell are you doing here?" Lena, Sam's former ally and trusted friend from her time in the military, stood before her. But the look in her eyes was cold, calculating. There was nothing warm or familiar about the way she looked at Sam now. Sam felt a knot form in her stomach. She couldn't comprehend it. After everything they had been through, Lena was supposed to be on their side. But the situation was becoming clearer by the second. Lena gave a hollow smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I should be asking you the same thing, Sam. I never thought I'd see the day when you'd turn against everything you've ever stood for." Sam's hand instinctively went to the sidearm holstered at her waist, but she didn't draw it yet. The confusion in her mind was overwhelming. "Turn against what? You're the one here, Lena. The one working with them." Lena's expression didn't change, but the coldness in her tone was unmistakable. "Don't you get it, Sam? I've always been one of them. I've been playing this game much longer than you. All this time, you thought you were on the side of the angels, but you're just another pawn in a bigger game." Sam's mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle that was unfolding before her. Her trust in Lena had been one of the few constants in the chaos that had surrounded her life. But now everything she knew felt like a lie. You've been working for them all along?" Sam could barely form the words, the betrayal stinging like 1,000 needles. "After everything we've done together, you were the enemy the whole time?" Lena stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "You never saw it, did you? All that talk about loyalty and honor, just words. The truth is, you've been so blinded by your good intentions that you didn't realize the game you were playing. This was never about right or wrong. It was about power. And in the end, I chose the side that wins." Sam's stomach churned. She took a step back, trying to steady her breath, but the anger inside her began to rise. How could she have been so blind? How could she not have seen this coming? Lena had always been too perfect, too sharp, and now it made sense. She had been feeding them information, playing her part in the deception while watching them get closer and closer to the heart of the operation. Why? Sam finally managed to ask, her voice full of pain and anger. Why do this to me? To all of us? Lena didn't flinch. She didn't even seem to feel the weight of Sam's words. Instead, she just shrugged. Because the truth is, I've never been on your side. I'm on my side, and I'm the one who's going to win. Sam's pulse raced, her mind spinning. The walls felt like they were closing in. She had to make a choice. She couldn't let Lena manipulate them any longer. But what if Lena wasn't the only one betraying them? What if they had all been played? Stay out of this, Sam, Lena warned coldly. You don't want to do this. You don't want to be the one to make the final move. Sam took another step back, her hand tightening around her weapon. You're right about one thing, she said, her voice steady, though fury burned in her chest. I don't want to do this, but I will. In the silence that followed, the tension between them felt palpable. Lena's hand hovered near her own weapon, but she didn't draw it. She was waiting, testing Sam's resolve, hoping she would hesitate. But Sam had already made up her mind. You've betrayed us, Lena, Sam said softly, her voice no longer quivering with doubt. And now you're going to pay the price. Lena's eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flash of emotion crossing her face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. You think I care about that? You think I'm scared of you, Sam? You've never understood. This was never personal. With a swift motion, Lena drew her gun. Sam's heart skipped a beat, and everything around her seemed to slow down. Her training kicked in, and before Lena could make her move, Sam was already taking action. She dove to the side, hitting the ground hard, the sound of gunfire ringing in her ears. The shot missed, but the danger was real. Lena was fast, too fast, but Sam had been faster. She aimed her weapon, her finger hovering over the trigger. Lena's eyes widened for a moment, realizing Sam was ready to fight back. Sam wasn't giving up. Not now. Not after everything they had gone through. This ends now, Lena, Sam said, her voice cold as ice. The two women faced each other in the dim light of the compound, the weight of their past, their friendship, and their betrayal hanging in the air like a cloud. Sam's mind was razor-sharp, focused entirely on Lena. She wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not after everything. You never got it, did you, Sam? Lena said, her voice surprisingly calm. You think this is about you, about us? But this is about something bigger. You were just in the way. You're wrong, Sam retorted, her voice steady. It's always been about people. The ones you destroy to get ahead. The silence that followed was deafening, and then, without warning, Lena moved. She lunged forward, but Sam was already pulling the trigger. The sound of the shot echoed through the compound, the force of it almost shaking the walls. Lena fell to the ground with a soft grunt, her eyes wide in shock. For a long moment, Sam couldn't move. The adrenaline coursed through her veins, and her hands shook as she holstered her weapon. She couldn't believe what she had just done. She had taken down a former friend, someone she had trusted, but in that moment, Sam knew there was no turning back. The rest of the compound was quiet as Sam, Marcus, and Ethan finished their mission, securing the intel and disabling the communications. They had taken down the faction's stronghold, but at a cost. Lena's betrayal weighed heavily on Sam's heart, but she knew there was no room for hesitation in this fight. As they exited the compound, Sam glanced back one last time. The mission had been a success, but the price had been steep. They had won, but at what cost?